Hello guys, welcome to Percy Fiction. So in this video, we will see, what if Percy reads Harry became the son of the Greek goddess Aphrodite? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. Shattered Charms. The scream punched through Hogsmeade like glass in a grinder. Too high, too many edges, a sound that made wands wobble in hands and sent a flock of school owls bursting from the post office eaves. Harry didn't think. He ran. He cleared a barrel of pickled eel at the corner of Honeydukes and took the alley at a cut, boots finding the shin-biting rhythm of cobble, breath steady, eyes lifting to the shimmer above the roofs. The thing rode the air on tatters of frost blue sound, a floating ribcage wrapped in veils the color of new bruises. Students were still spilling from the lane leading to the three broomsticks. Some already huddled behind crates, some staring back. Harry shouted, "Under cover! Now!" The banshee turned its skull, a bare lantern with teeth, and opened its mouth. The next scream hit like gravel poured into his ears. Harry flinched and still brought his wand up, left hand sliding to the bronze ring tucked inside his sleeve. No lecture from anyone he respected would make him pretend that voice didn't terrify him. He met it anyway. "Continuo," he snapped, and a band of light drew a line across the alley like a tripwire. The banshee jerked aside, owing veer that would have wrecked a broom at that angle. It felt the line more than saw it. The air thickened around it. Harry didn't smile. He angled his shoulder and flicked the ring into his palm. A smooth circle no larger than a biscuit tin lid, studded with faint runes that caught the winter sun. A first year stumbled on the far side of the square, all scarf and red cheeks and two big gloves. She fell hard on her side and slid, screaming, right over the edge of the low stone bridge that arched toward the shrieking shack path. Harry changed direction mid-stride. The ring left his hand a whisper, an arc of bronze that curved and clipped the banshee's trailing shawl enough to twist its angle, and Harry dove. Stone blurred under his palms. He reached, fingers closing over wool and cold skin. She hit his shoulder, knocked his breath, and he rolled to take the impact instead of her. "Hold on," he hissed, not because it helped but because she needed to hear a voice that sounded like it would not let go. The ring hummed back through the air like a returning breath. He caught it clumsily and barely kept from cutting his fingers. The banshee dropped to feed on the panic surge it had created, gliding low. Harry flattened his palm. He didn't push force at it. He pushed intention, the way he'd learned by trial and sharp error these last months when certain feelings amplified strange results. Everyone down. Everyone safe. Space to move. The air around him shifted like the room inhaled. Students who had been frozen went instinctively to the ground. 2 sixth years hauling a third behind a barrel found their feet under them just long enough to finish the drag. The banshee's scream hiccuped. Its flow bucked, just for a heartbeat, as if some part of its malice suddenly doubted itself. Expelliarmus. Someone tried, and the red streak lanced past Harry's shoulder. The banshee fed on that, found a direction, and banked toward the wand's source. "Don't," Harry called, not harsh, just quick. Sound trap. Mists. North corner. He sprinted toward the shrieking shack lane. Madame Rosmerta had hung fog charms over the alley to keep the chill from icing the barrels. Harry jerked his wand, tore one free, and flung the dense white cloud into the open square. The banshee followed its hunger into the dense air where sound warped and repeated. Screams jabbed themselves in echoes, circled back, tangled with their own edges. The creature staggered. Its voice slashed itself. Harry's ring sang. He whipped it at the thing's throat, not to sever. He wasn't keen on discovering. Gee whether banshee necks bled, but to clip the tattered scarf and spin it. The bronze circle kissed bone with a little chime and returned, hot against his palm. "Down," he shouted, and dropped with the rest as the banshee's scream folded into itself, pulled tighter, tighter. The shock rolled through the square like a drumhead smack. Windows rattled. The creature crumpled into silence, veils sagging. Harry held still for one slow breath. Then another, until he felt the wrongness drain away from the stones. He rose. The first year he'd grabbed was breathing fast, blinking at him like he'd hauled her back from a dream of falling. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling. Not your fault. He steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. Find your friends. Find a professor. Go, Mr. Potter. The tight voice came from behind him. Clipped with relief. McGonagall, robes ash-dusted, hair slightly escaped from its bun, wand steady in her hand. Report, if you please. Banshee-type variant, Harry said. It exploited the crowd noise. There may be a second. The street answered him with a hiss as water swelled above the far rooftops. A wave rose past the chimney pots, held shape in defiance of gravity, and slammed down in a curtain that hit the open thoroughfare at a slant. People screamed again, but the water never touched them. It ran like a wall across the Banshee's sprawled veil, pinning it. A boy stepped through the dying spray as if stepping out of a curtain backstage. 17, 18, hair dark, eyes sea glass bright with that look Harry recognized from mirrors after a battle. Scanning, counting, deciding. A bronze sword hung easy from his hand. He turned his head like he heard the river talk to him, and then he grinned in a way that said danger pleased him, not for fun but because it solved a simple equation. Hey, he said, and his voice carried like ripples. Mind if we close your portal problem before it starts breeding? Harry blinked. Another girl, bounced off a low fence with the kind of grace you only get if you've been fighting monsters since 9. Blonde hair tied back high, eyes dead steady, a hunting knife riding the twitch of her hip. Behind her, a stocky kid with a hammer that looked too heavy to belong to anyone but him jogged up, and a tall boy with an astronomer's patience walked at the tail, eyes flicking to the edges. 2 more, each checking different angles. And then, as if the suggestion had summoned him, a half-transparent rectangle of light bloomed in the air above the square, the shimmering face of an old centaur who no business looking that serene in a crisis. Chiron, McGonagall said, cautious but not cold. To what do we owe the honor? Monsters don't queue at borders, Professor. The centaur's voice carried with long practice. With your permission, we'll plug the tear that drew this one here. Harry felt the ripple before he saw it. Air thinning near the shrieking shack path, a smell like burned time, a taste of copper. Veil thin reality, threaded wrong. The blonde girl caught his glance and nodded once, like she approved of anyone who could feel a breach before it showed. Harry looked to McGonagall. She gave a single, tiny nod. Do the sensible thing. Retain authority while you do it. Coordinate, she said. Mr. Potter, you will not attempt the hero on your own. Fat chance, Harry muttered, and was glad for how McGonagall's mouth twitched. The sea-eyed boy moved closer. He didn't extend a hand to shake as if this were a club and they were all members now. He didn't size Harry up like a rival either. He looked at the collapsed Banshee, at the whispering tear, at the students corralled behind barrels, and chose a tone like they had minutes, not seconds, to avoid making a bad mistake. Percy, he said, this is Annabeth, Leo, Will, and Piper. And no, we don't usually do tours. Sorry for interrupting your candy run. Harry said, and shifted his grip on the ring. They got fog charms in a room with surprisingly thin walls that echoes worse than it should. Sounds multiplying. If a second one comes through, it'll feed. Nice. Percy's grin flicked. I can drown the echo in pressure waves. Can you carve us a clean path to the tear without making everyone here feel like they should agree with you just because you spoke? Annabeth's eyes cut to Percy for that, meaning threaded through a look. The blonde, Piper, lifted 2 fingers like she could have said the same thing in an edgier way and chose not to. Harry felt the warning without annoyance. He nodded back. We do this with consent. I need space, not obedience. Good, Daphne Greengrass said from Harry's left, precise as a pin sliding into a map. She had appeared behind a toppled crate like a cat arriving from a different room. Hair tossed by the wind, green scarf neat anyway. She didn't look impressed by the demigods or the monster or the panic. She looked at Harry. Boundaries. Say them out loud. Right now, Harry asked. Why? Because she wanted it public, and she had a point. Right now, she said, and hooked a finger at the ring in his hand like she'd seen something that did not match any wizard set she knew. No charming free minds. My voice is mine, Harry said, pitch quiet but firm. I can make room for people to choose. I can't make the choice. If I push past that, I lose you. You lose me, she said, and didn't glance at the crowd to see if this played. It wasn't for them. It still helped them. The air steadied. Annabeth relaxed an inch. Piper's mouth ticked. Percy rolled his shoulders with a little shake, the kind fighters do before the bell. "All right," he said. "Let's fix your tear." They moved. Percy went first at a slant, not straight at the breach. The water he called out of nowhere came in sheets that didn't splash, only leaned into the world like a pane set at an angle. It hummed against the alley voices, ate the reverb, calmed the air. Leo peeled left and vaulted a barrel. Hands white-knuckled around a tool that spat sparks at the banshee's broken veils until they stopped trying to knit themselves. Will held the edge where students had crowded. Not with his hands but with the way he made people breathe steadier just by being there. Piper stayed at Harry's shoulder without stepping into him, like she knew exactly how to be near a person whose feelings carried weight. Harry didn't open himself and flood the square. He let a thin pulse ripple from chest to fingers, a subtle change in heat. It murmured in spines. Crouch here, stand there, duck now. A seventh year who hadn't listened to anyone in 2 months listened now. Daphne moved with him, wand out, eyes narrow. Annabeth's braids skimmed the back of her jacket as she passed half a step ahead. Calculating angles on the fly, how the tear strained, which beam above it would drop if the noise spiked, where to send Leo so the sparks didn't set the wrong thing on fire. "Professor, a voice shouted from the ridge above, the Hogsmeade guard posted on the apparatus walkway, breathless. "There's something on the roof of Zonko's, looks like a Muggle camera with holes." McGonagall didn't look. "Miss Bones, inform the guard that anything on the roof of Zonko's is probably Zonko's, and if it moves, hex it thrice." The tear widened a fraction. Harry felt cold on his teeth. The ring heated in his palm and wanted to fly. He tightened his grip. "On my count," he told Percy. 3, 2. A figure stood on the edge of a chimney like he grew there, a silhouette in matte gear, stance loose, attention precise. He didn't move a wand or a sword. He watched the breach the way an engineer watches a bridge. His face was unmasked, young but not blind, sharp eyes that never seemed to blink. He didn't smile, but something in his poised quiet acknowledged effort when he saw it. "Who is that?" Daphne asked. "Low. Not ours," Percy said. "Not a monster." His tone rode unexpected respect. "Not friendly," Piper added. "But not screaming either." Harry filed the man under problems that would stand up and walk later. He didn't take his eyes off the tear. "Now," he said, and Percy brought pressure down. Water sang when it moves at just the right frequency over just the right gap. Percy shaped that hum with his hands and his mouth, not speaking words, just setting a beat. The tear rippled. Annabeth flanked it and drove a bronze spike through the warped bit of reality like a seamstress pinning a wild hem. Leo hit the spike with a tap that sent a snarl of runes through metal, and the air locked, then eased. The tear tried to birth a second banshee. The head pushed through veil, snarling, and the sound would have obliterated a dozen umbrellas, 3 brains, and Harry's equilibrium if he hadn't already been moving. He didn't dare order it to hush. He put himself between the breach and the nearest students, drove the ring at the banshee's spine as it emerged, and then, without thinking about what anyone saw or how this felt, he pulled. Not on the creature, on everything in between. Panic felt like static pricking skin. Courage felt like heat on the back of the neck. Love felt like a thin wire drawn taut between 2 people in a storm, and Harry plucked that wire. He didn't push his fear out. He drew their resolve in, braided it, and let it hum against the banshee's throat. The scream cracked. Just a hairline. Enough. Stupefy. Daphne's spell snapped the thing's unformed eye. Will sent a shockwave through the water that clapped like a hand and pressed the creature half back through. Percy took 2 fast steps, brought the sword up, and reversed it at the last second, striking with the flat. The banshee collapsed, half born, half banished, and then nothing was here except wind and a bad feeling that leaked away like steam. The square held for 3 long beats. No one moved because no one wanted to be the first to test whether the world had become real again. Then McGonagall's voice floated in, composed in the way only people who have seen too much chaos ever learn to master. "Healers to the square, prefects, head counts, Mr. Potter, Mr. Jackson," Percy supplied. "Hi, Jackson. You will join me and Chiron at the 3 broomsticks." She paused, Eyes flicked to Harry's left. Miss Greengrass, since you are apparently attached to Mr. Potter by a short invisible thread, you may attend as well. I'm not attached, Daphne said, and then glared at Harry as if daring him to laugh. He didn't. He tried not to look pleased that she had chosen proximity anyway. Good, McGonagall said. Keep it that way. The man on the chimney watched all the while. He didn't interfere, didn't interrupt. He lifted a small device to his eye, squeezed a corner, and the thing clicked almost soundlessly. Harry felt the barest brush into the place behind his breastbone where Deeds sat waiting to be judged. It wasn't magic, but it wasn't nothing either. The figure dipped his chin exactly once, like you might salute an opponent you intend to fight later for better reasons, and stepped backward into shadow that should not have been deep enough to swallow a human. He vanished. The roof didn't creak. Zonko's sign swung idly as if nothing had perched. Later, Percy said, he's a neat problem. Let him be a later problem. Agreed, Harry said. They walked. People watched without pretending not to, but the watching had changed. Fear edged back. Curiosity crept in. Harry kept his shoulders loose. If he let the way their eyes pulled at him get too close. The pull tugged at everything else. The tone of the room, the heat in his hands, the way the ring wanted to sing. He didn't want any of that. He wanted a door, a table, hot butterbeer, and adults doing the adult thing so he could work with space to breathe. The 3 broomsticks held its smell like a badge. Melted sugar, cinnamon, and something behind it that meant shelter. Rosmerta had already cleared the back room. Chiron's window of light sat in the middle of the table like a bowl of water someone had forgotten to spill. McGonagall took the chair at the head. Percy sat without asking where. Harry took the seat opposite him. Daphne at his right, Annabeth at Percy's left. Piper and Will flanked the door. Leo drummed once and then sat on his own hands to stop himself. Thank you, McGonagall said to the room at large. She set her quill down without ink. Now, explanations. Quick version, Percy said. We're demigods. Monsters like today's banshee sniff out our lives like blood in water. They rarely cross into wizard places unless someone stitches reality wrong on purpose or by accident. He glanced toward the window that wasn't a window. We track tears. We plug them. Sometimes we fight. We prefer not to, but we're good at it when it keeps kids from dying. Who stitched this one? Daphne asked. Someone who wants your worlds at each other's throats, Piper said. Or who wants to test whether you'll notice if they start weaving threads through your veil. The veil, Annabeth echoed. Her eyes were already running a path Harry knew, map overlaying the city, lines intersecting at the Department of Mysteries. You have something like a boundary door in your government's sandbox. If you keep poking it, something older than gods gets interested. We don't poke, McGonagall said, dry. We perform cautious research designed to prevent future catastrophes. I admire that, Annabeth said, and meant it. Catastrophes tend not to read advisories. Harry still felt the trace of frost behind his teeth. I felt it before it showed, he said. Like someone played a note under the floorboards. Percy nodded. You'd feel it. You vibrate rooms when you breathe on purpose. Daphne's elbow touched Harry's. A light knock, a reminder. Say your boundary again. He heard it without her saying it. He kept his palms flat on the table. Chiron's face softened. Harry Potter, he said as if saying it to himself as well, tasting the shape the name had taken since the last time he'd heard it across centuries of watching mortals do brave and foolish things. Your mother asked me to pass a message if you survived long enough to be ready to hear it. You were hidden because life would use you without asking. You were not hidden so that you would hide. The back room went very quiet. Pipes creaked in the wall. Someone outside laughed, too loud, and then hushed themselves as if the laugh had set off a bell. My mother, Harry repeated. As in, Aphrodite, Piper said, and smiled in a way that wasn't coy, wasn't sparkly, wasn't anything like the brittle glitter people tossed at the idea of love as a weapon. She's not a pretty poster. She's the reason soldiers book travel home and politicians don't nuke a birthday. She's complicated. Harry let the truth land or miss him, didn't chase it with words. The truth had been circling him for months, bumping elbows with him in empty halls. Showing up in the way rooms shifted when he decided to speak. He thought of the ring in his hand and the way it wanted to fly only when he meant to protect, not to cut. He thought of the dozen times he'd used an edge of this to de-escalate and the one time he'd pushed and watched a friend blink like they'd lost a second of their life, and the taste of that second still made him feel like he needed to rinse his mouth in the lake. If that's true, he said slowly, then how do I lead with it without becoming a person I wouldn't trust? Percy leaned back and blank, his chair just enough to annoy McGonagall and set it down before she could scold him. You set rules, he said. And you let people you respect hold you to them. Daphne's hand found his under the table without fuss. She didn't lace fingers. She pressed and then let go like a terminal check. You just made one, she said. Keep making them. McGonagall tapped her quill. I will not permit Hogwarts to become a crossroads for every ancient quarrel, she said. But I cannot wish the world smaller. We will coordinate. Discreetly. Formally. Mr. Jackson, you will liaise with me through Professor Flitwick. Mr. Potter, you will obey curfew like every other student and also save the world on Tuesdays, apparently. Percy deadpanned. I have Wednesdays free. A noise from the door cut the humor. Rosmerta slipped in, face pale. Sorry to interrupt, she said. There's a man outside asking if anyone would like to give a statement on today's incident. He says he represents Aegis Directorate. Piper swore under her breath. Will shut his eyes briefly like a man counting to 10. Leo whispered, of course he's already here, and then made a face as if that line tasted like someone else's oil. Aegis, Annabeth said to McGonagall, they're mortals with a mission statement that sounds clean when written down. Balance, accountability, ending divine collateral damage in the name of mortal sovereignty. They do good, selectively. They also collect things that unbalance the world when placed in the wrong hands, which is to say any hands. They have a leader, Piper added, who makes beautiful speeches to empty rooms. She looked at Harry. He watched you fight. He'll want to categorize you. Let him want, McGonagall said crisply. Madame Rosmerta, inform the gentleman that Hogwarts does not conduct interviews on demand. Rosmerta bobbed and vanished. Harry's ring felt heavier. He looked at Chiron. What did she ask you to tell me besides that I was hidden? Chiron's eyes warmed. Only this. When your voice can move a crowd, do not mistake a mob for a family. And when love begins to feel like leverage, hand it back until it feels like choice again. He inclined his head, as if to someone not in the room. She also mentioned you never listen unless the advice is inconvenient. That sounds like her, Percy said, deadpan. Piper elbowed him. He didn't deny it. Harry, Daphne said softly. So it was just for him and also for anyone with ears because secrets in crises make rooms flammable. I believe you can do this without compromise. I also believe you will be tempted to make things easier. I'll walk with you if you let me keep you honest. Deal, he said, and the word didn't feel pretty. It felt like a nail through two boards to make a stronger beam. The quill on the table stopped tapping. McGonagall's gaze had shifted past Harry's shoulder to the window and beyond it, where the square still moved, still looked the same, still did not feel like the same square. We will inform the ministry on our terms, she said, and we will not permit outside agencies to exercise jurisdiction over Hogwarts. Her eyes returned to Harry. Which includes you, Mr. Potter. Understood, he said. He meant it. The relief he felt at not being anointed with another job didn't quite reach his bones, but it brushed them. He took what he could get. They stood. Percy paused at the door, hand on the knob, and glanced back. Nice throw, he said, chin indicating the ring. Where'd you learn to turn a circle like that? Accidentally, Harry said. Most useful things start that way. Percy's mouth crooked. We'll argue about turf later. For now, good work. They stepped into the common noise of a village that had decided, in that resilient way communities have, to return to the business of chewing sweets and complaining about prices. The sunlight looked ordinary again. Harry didn't trust it, not out of cynicism, but because he could still taste the edge of wrong in his mouth. A hand brushed his sleeve. Daphne, again, he's right, she said, tone pragmatic. Arguing about turf later, I mean. For now, eat something. Stopping to chew is a useful habit if you intend to not die of idealism. I plan to live out of spite, Harry said, and watched the way her mouth fought not to smile. It made him more careful with the warmth that wanted to leak out of I am whenever she looked pleased for any reason. He didn't want to think about what his warmth did in rooms like this. He wanted to think about keeping it small, controlled, real. A tremor went through his palm where the ring rested. The bronze warmed and cooled like something far away had exhaled. Harry turned a fraction and caught sight, above the angle of a roofline, of a woman standing where no one else stood. She looked like sunlight through a glass of pomegranate juice, all rose and gold, but there wasn't a scrap of sweetness on her face. She looked like a general on a ridge, counting where to deploy hope. No one else seemed to see her. Then again, ordinary people miss miracles even when they walk through them. She raised her hand, not to beckon or bless. She set 2 fingers to her own mouth and then to her heart. An old soldier's sign Harry didn't know he knew until he returned it without thinking. Her voice didn't use ears. It arrived the way a scent arrives when a door opens on summer. When they come to name your power, love, do not let them make it small. He could have asked 100 questions. He said the only thing that didn't feel like a ritual. All right. The corner of her mouth edged up. Fond and fierce. She nodded once, and the light that made her shape thinned into ordinary sun. Harry breathed. He turned back to Daphne. I'm fine, he said. Let's. The door of the 3 broomsticks swung a second time. A man stepped through. Clean boots, coat without speck or scuff, hair cut like he didn't let weather decide things for him. He didn't carry a wand. He carried the kind of attention that cleared room around him because it made people uncomfortable if they stood too close. Aegis Directorate, he said, as if introducing the weather. Cassian Vale. His eyes touched Harry. Percy down the street, the students, the square, the place in the air where the tear had been, and returned. Thank you for not letting bodies stack. You're not welcome to set foot on school property uninvited, McGonagall said, shoulders drawing up with the particular majesty of someone who can transfigure idiots into matchboxes. This is a village, but it may as well be an annex of Hogwarts insofar as. I'm not here to claim jurisdiction. Cassian didn't bristle. He sounded like a man who had an argument with himself about whether to respect people and had mostly decided to do it. I'm here to acknowledge competence and ask for a conversation when you aren't putting out fires. His eyes went to Harry again, then Daphne, then the ring. You are learning to use a lever that moves rooms. You'll find him inconveniently ethical about it, Daphne said, calm as tea. Come back when you appreciate that kind of inconvenience. Cassian considered her like she had presented a math problem that, if solved, would save lives. Noted, he said, there will be more breaches. Someone wants them. When you want to compare notes about stopping that someone, send AM. Message to the name you'll find tucked under your bell in the Ollery. You left a card in our Ollery. McGonagall asked, scandalized for the principle rather than the action. I left a name. Paper burns. Cassian's mouth tilted half a degree. Children don't deserve to pay for the fights of their parents. The rest of us can argue about terms later. He angled his head to Harry like a fencer Sal. Ooting and stepped back out into the street. The crowd exhaled the breath they'd held during his presence without knowing they were holding it. Percy, leaning against a post a few yards away, shot Harry a look. Later problem, remember? Harry nodded. Later. The students dispersed under prefect orders with the same grumbling that follows every order that keeps people alive. The smashed glass got swept. The blood that wasn't blood, the residue of banshee screams, evaporated in a thin shimmer. The cold sharpened, honest again. Harry walked the long way to the castle with Daphne, scuffing the toe of his boot on old ice. Listening to the whicker of thestrals near the edge of the woods, letting noise and wind make normal shapes around him. The ring felt heavier in his pocket. Not a burden. A tool. That would hurt him first if he forgot what it was. You going to tell Ron and Hermione tonight? Daphne asked, brisk, like the question itself offered him a scaffold. Yeah, he said, and then I'm going to ask them to tell me if I start sounding like I want to win more than I want to be right. She gave him a sidelong look that wasn't unkind. You'll be fine, Potter. You collect promises like chess pieces. Try not to play them against each other. He huffed. No promises. Liar. They took the last rise. Hogwarts shouldered the sky the way it always did, arrogant and beloved and full of drafts. From the hilltop, Hogsmeade looked small and stubborn and intact. He watched 3 first-years slip hands into one another's pockets to warm them as they walked, watched a fourth pretend to hate that he had to jog to catch up. Watched the casual heroism of children deciding they were all getting hot chocolate whether they had coins or not. The wind cut the last of the banshee's taste from his tongue. He could still feel the moment when he'd pulled on that wire between people, made it hum. He could still feel the temptation that lived in the crook of his hand when he held the ring, the sweet, cheap ease of making a room lean your way. Don't let them make it small, the knot voice had said, and he didn't want to. He wanted to make it honest. A flock of owls banked over the great hall roof. Bodies neat as runes on a line. One broke out from the group and arrowed toward him, a little faster, a little crooked. It wobbled on the wind, straightened, and dropped a message into his palm with all the grace of a slingshot misfire. The parchment contained a name written in a hand that hated flourish, Vale. Someone had tucked it under the bell in the Ollery after all. Harry folded it and put it in his pocket next to the ring. One felt like a weapon. One felt like a line he hadn't decided whether to cross. Dinner? Daphne asked. I could eat an entire hippogriff, Harry said. Don't, she said. Hagrid would cry. Quote. They went inside. Warmth rolled over them. The hum of 1,000 voices rose. Harry slipped into it and let it upend the last of the adrenaline. He filed the day into the cabinet of things he couldn't afford to forget and promised himself he'd stop the next breach before it hit the square. He didn't say it aloud. He didn't have to. He had people who would say it for him if he let them. From the staff table, McGonagall watched him, unreadable. Percy, somewhere in town, probably argued with a shopkeeper about the price of dry socks. Cassian walked a nay on a map and drew a circle around a place called the Department of Mysteries. Eris. Harry didn't know her yet, not by name. He knew the way arguments cropped up like weeds where there'd been none and the way headlines seemed written before events happened. The ring warmed once in his pocket, then settled. He passed the pumpkin juice, grinned at something stupid Seamus said, and felt the room settle around him like a cloak he had chosen to wear rather than one draped over his shoulders by a world that never asked. That choice tasted like a better kind of power, small, local, stubbornly human. Above the high windows, snow started again in little flakes, unbothered by gods, politics, or boys who learned to throw rings like answers. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Terms and Boundaries. By morning, Hogwarts wore its calm like a dare. The sky was the color of quills left too long in ink. The air had the thin winter brightness that makes stone look cleaner than it is. Harry took his tea black, and hot and stared at the parchment McGonagall had hand-delivered to his plate before breakfast. It was not a summons. It was a schedule. 10 o'clock. Closed door convening in the Transfiguration antechamber. Attendees: Professor McGonagall, Professor Flitwick, Chiron via Iris Link, Mr. Jackson and party, Mr. Potter. Optional observer: Miss Greengrass. Optional, as if Daphne had ever watched an inferno from the corridor when the door was unlocked. He arrived early and pretended he hadn't. The antechamber held the smell of chalk and old cedar, the hush of rooms where arguments don't echo because none are permitted to. Flitwick adjusted a set of privacy charms with light taps of his wand. On the center table, a bowl of water shimmered into a window. Chiron's face took shape with the patience of someone who never rushed even when rushing might have saved a life. Percy breezed in 2 minutes to the hour, hair damp like he'd argued with the lake and Juan. Annabeth chose the chair she faced the door and also the window, habit. Piper leaned against a cabinet, hands in jacket pockets as if that kept nerves steady. Will clipped a healer's kit to the back of a chair and sat on its edge like he never really sat. Leo turned a brass cog over in his fingers, not fidgeting so much as thinking with the edge of his hands. McGonagall took the head chair. Daphne slid into the seat at Harry's right and crossed one leg over the other, neat, shoulders squared like she had chosen to be seen and would not apologize for it. Thank you for coming, McGonagall said. We'll keep this brief and practical. Yesterday's breach required coordination. There will be others. We will not run a circus. Agreed, Percy said. I like circuses when they have popcorn and implausible elephants. Not when kids are the trapeze. Chiron's muzzle lifted, amused. Camp can assign a small response team to your perimeter with strict rules of engagement. Your faculty shares early warnings. We patch tiers before they widen. Strict rules, McGonagall said, the words tidy and edged. You tread on school grounds when invited, not when you feel like testing your boots. You speak to staff, not students, unless a life is at risk. You treat this castle as if it refuses to bend for you, because it does. Understood, Annabeth said. We don't want to live here. We want you to not die because our problems are louder than yours. Harry listened to the shape the plan made as it formed. A rail, a lane, a way to say yes without crying open house to the world. His ring warmed under his cuff in 3 pulses that matched his heartbeat and then cooled. Percy glanced at him like checking whether the current carried him too. You all right? Fine, Harry said. He meant, not drowned. Good. Percy's grin went quick. Because after we talk boring logistics, I want to see how you move when no one's screaming. Better to bruise in practice than in the square. Daphne didn't flinch. Boundaries first, she said. Practice later. The room pivoted around that word. Harry felt it land and anchor the conversation. He liked that Daphne did not soften into pleasantry just because everyone here was technically on the same side. She had a Slytherin's loyalty to the rules of the room once she'd negotiated them. He didn't wait to be asked. I won't use, whatever you want to call it, to push friends. Not to get my way. Not to hurry a decision. On civilians, in crisis, I'll carve space and cut panic, never overwrite will. If I cross that line, you tell me, and I stop. I let you walk. No sulking. No arguments. Piper's expression lit with professional approval mixed with relief. Niece. Put it in a sentence you can say even when you're bleeding. I make room for choice, I don't make the choice, Harry said. If I forget, stop me. Good, Daphne said. She leaned in an inch, the way you might when someone says the correct answer to something that matters. And if you break that rule, I leave the room and your life until you prove you can hold the line again. That's a bit dramatic, Leo said, and then saw Daphne's face and thought better of it. Which in this case is me saying I add me. Re your spine and will not comment further. McGonagall's mouth twitched. Excellent, she said, and if satisfaction were a sound it would have been the clean snap of a lock returning to place. Now, logistics. Professor Flitwick, if you would. Flitwick's voice had a way of making complex spells sound like manageable recipes. We'll tie a low-latency alert net from the castle wards to Camp's scrying pool. Minimal information. Flare here, now, possible tear. We can filter false positives. In return, you'll send a 3-word call sign when you enter a mile radius, to which we answer with, granted, or, stand by. If we do not answer, you do not enter. Annabeth nodded like she'd already made the schematic in her head. Clean. We'll set the call sign as today's date backward until you change it. Acceptable, McGonagall said, though she looked like she wanted to disapprove of cleverness on principle. We will also brief the heads of house. This is not for student ears beyond prefects who need to know why their walks will now include looking up. Chiron inclined his head. We have our terms. Now, a small, related matter, the presence of an Aegis observer yesterday. Mr. Vale is, he paused, choosing accuracy over brevity. Determined. He will try to make himself part of your solutions. Or sell the solution to someone with order in their slogan, Leo muttered. Mr. Vale's organization is likely to improve certain outcomes while imperiling others, McGonagall said. We will not be seduced by their rhetoric. And we won't pretend they never save people, Will added. That's how you get blindsided. Respect what they do well while you lock down what they shouldn't touch. Daphne tapped the table once, knuckles neat. They want artifacts that reduce divine influence. If they get something like that Veil Thorn before anyone else, they will use it and explain later. Keep them out of the Department of Mysteries. They'll be there already, Annabeth said. Not physically. Through policy. Through the person whose job title has the word, under, in it, plus teeth. Harry let the weight of that sit. It didn't feel like dread. It felt like clarity. Then we plan for it, he said. And we don't give them excuses to be right about us. Percy stood, stretching like a cat who thought the next room might have more interesting furniture to break. Okay, we've shaken hands. Let's bruise. McGonagall arched an eyebrow. Do keep the blood off my flagstones. They found empty turf on the training lawn behind the greenhouses, where the snow tamped flat into bright crust and the air tasted like pennyroyal. No audience except a pair of bored thestrals whose bony faces gave nothing away. Harry shrugged off his cloak and rolled his shoulders. Percy set his sword eyed with care and picked up a practice blade that looked like a length of pipe polished by years of hands. No mortalities, Annabeth said. No broken friendships. Go. They didn't circle. They edged toward each other and met like the first steps of a conversation. Harry kept his wand low, the ring in his other hand warmed just enough to remind him it could sing. Percy tested the snow with the SLAP of his blade and then moved in a straight line that became not straight the second it met Harry's footwork. Harry led him toward a divot in the lawn. Percy noticed, planted the wrong foot anyway to make a point, slipped by design, and came up swinging. Harry caught the swing with a flick of the ring that made the blade glance by his ribs, a kiss of cold against winter wool. He didn't push a pull, say into Percy's head to slow his decision loop. He didn't need to. He needed to read the angle of his eyebrow, the micro-tension in the shoulder that telegraphed feint from strike. Percy tested range, rhythm, and patience. Harry gave him speed and misdirection. Percy's blade thudded into snow near Harry's boot, water hissed up from the ground like a breath. Not a wave, just pressure, just the suggestion of heavy weather. Harry pushed off it, let the ring cut a line the blade would not cross, and spoke a spell without raising his voice. Immobilis. Short. Percy slowed as if a rubber band had snapped around his waist and yanked. The slowing lasted a heartbeat. He grinned. Cute. Thanks, Harry said. Percy changed the tempo. He brought the blade up and down in a rhythm that was not swordwork so much as language. The air obeyed. Snow compacted around Harry's boots. His ankles locked. He cut the charm off, took a quick stumble step into open ground, and Percy was already there, already laughing because he liked to fight where both sides had to think. Harry flicked the ring and Percy stepped aside from a circle that would have clipped his ear. Ha, he said, and feinted high, then low, then not at all. Then laughed again because Harry didn't bite on the fake and answered the real one with a wand flick that made Percy's sleeve freeze solid for 3 inches. Hey, Percy said cheerfully, shaking it out. My mom will murder you if I get frostbite. Noted, Harry said, and tried an angle he'd only practiced once in an empty corridor when no one could see him look foolish. Rin. G edge across the practice blade at 45, wand up for the disarm, step through, close the distance, not to dominate, just to show Percy that close wasn't safe for him either. Percy accepted the lesson, took it apart, handed it back in a better shape. He boxed Harry in with nothing but shoulders and breath, the blade less interesting than the way his presence made space. Harry would have to use the aura pulse to open a lane, except he didn't. He moved his left foot half an inch and tapped Percy's shin with his boot like a friend asking to pass. Percy snorted and let him through on respect. They broke, panting now, sweat sharp in the cold air. Annabeth's mouth crooked like an archer pleased by a clean group of arrows in the target. Daphne clapped once, quiet. Again, she said, and less flirting. That was flirting, Percy said, mock wounded. I have been doing it wrong for years. They went again. The second bout was uglier, which mattered more. Harry caught a chunk of Percy's blade with the ring and it jarred his wrist to sparks. Percy slipped on actual ice this time and swore like a boy, not a hero. Harry stepped back instead of in. Percy saw it. He had the shot to clip Harry's ribs and he didn't take it. He changed angle and rapped Harry's shoulder with the flat. Pain flared. It spoke sense. Keep your guard, Potter. They stopped when their breath smoked like new orgs and their hands shook from more than cold. Will tossed Harry a bottle of something salty without comment. Harry drank and passed it to Percy, who downed the rest like the sea didn't count drinks. Good, Annabeth said. You adapt without getting greedy. Percy, stop showing off. Harry, don't respect his feints just because you like him. I don't like him, Harry said, offended in the exact way that made everyone laugh. Boundaries, Daphne prompted, not because he'd crossed one, but because repetition builds muscle. I make room for choice, Harry repeated, breath finding a rhythm again. I don't make the choice. Percy pointed at Daphne. I like her, he said. She's the, don't lick the portkey, sign you keep ignoring even though you know better. Stop building me a shrine, Daphne said dryly. Make yourself useful and collect your damp friend before he turns the lawn into a bog. They returned to the castle just ahead of the first rumor. It caught them right inside the west doors. A fourth-year reading from a folded Daily Prophet afternoon special, voice pitched to Carrie. Anonymous sources within the Department of Mysteries express concern that recent demigod Inku R. Science precipitated an unstable veil event in Hogsmeade yesterday, endangering students. Harry didn't need to see the byline to know the shape of the leak. The wording had the clean cruelty of Psalm. One who liked facts that made emotions cheap. Aegis hadn't invented the event, but someone there had sharpened the angle and slid it to the press. Students looked up, already mixing emotions with useful heat. They brought monsters, someone said, and it wasn't malicious, just frightened. We were fine until, no, we weren't, a Hufflepuff sixth year snapped, eyes bright. We were fine because they were here and so were we. She cut herself off, embarrassed by her own volume. Harry loved her fiercely in that second, which was exactly the kind of power he didn't dare use like a lever. Piper stepped forward before Harry could. Before any aura could shape what people already felt. She lifted her chin, not to perform but to make her words land clean. Monsters find us, she said. We don't bring them like pets. We're sorry some of our fights spill into your streets. We'll do better. If you want us gone, we go. But if you want help, we're here all day, every day, without headlines when it goes right. She didn't charm them. Harry felt that with relief. She simply told the truth in a tone that welcomed anyone who wanted to stand closer to it. The room's heat shifted, not fixed, not solved, just tilted away from the easy blame. The article spread like dye in water. By lunch, a second column sprouted, an op-ed asking whether Hogwarts had a duty to shield students from mythic entanglement by forbidding certain guests. McGonagall's mouth thinned to a razor. She never wasted time on denial when a problem wanted action. Mr. Potter, she said, catching him at the corridor junction, a word. They took it in her office. The room held stone and books and a lion's patience. She closed the door and didn't sit, a signal that this would be short. You will not speak to the press today, she said. Not because you haven't got a spine or because I don't trust what you'll say. Because we don't dance to someone else's tempo. We set our own. Understood, Harry said, and you will not try to fix every frightened child by standing near them and making them brave. Her gaze softened just enough to require honesty. Let their friends do some of that work. Or they'll need you to breathe for them every time. That is no life for anyone. I know, he said. It scraped. She heard it. She tapped a letter opener on her desk. I will go to the ministry this afternoon. They will try to rope me with courtesy and then strangle me with it. I intend to leave with a private understanding that your friend Mr. Jackson is allowed to walk our grounds when the sky opens. While I am gone, you will go to class like a student. Then, with the faintest concession to humor she'd allow herself on a day like this, do try not to save the building until I return. I'll pencil it in for later, Harry said. Excellent. She sat at last. The chair didn't groan. It suited her. Close the door behind you. He found Percy on the staircase landing arguing playfully with a suit of arm. Or about the ethics of chaperoning monsters. Annabeth was drawing lines in the dust with her boot tip, mapping something she hadn't yet told anyone because she didn't like to be wrong in public. Daphne leaned on the railing, gloved fingers precise on the banister, watching the upward drift of owls bearing the day's other news. You're off message, she said when Harry reached her. Good. The prop. Head would love your face and your poor impulse control. I have excellent impulse control, Harry said. You have improved impulse control, she amended, which he accepted because it was true. She glanced up at the owls. There'll be a third piece by evening. A calm voice talking about safety. It will seem reasonable. It will ask for oversight. It will feel like relief. That one will be the worst. Written by who? Percy asked. Aegis adjacent, Daphne said. Or a board undersecretary whose calendar suddenly filled with coffees with very polite people. Same difference. Can we head it off? Will said. No, Daphne said. We refuse to play defense. We get ahead by doing the work well, loudly only when it keeps kids alive. Annabeth nodded once. Then we need a prototype of doing the work well. Soon. They got one faster than comfort allowed. Mid-afternoon, the greenhouse bells rang, not the class chime but the one that meant a professor had hit 3 wards at once. Professor S. Prout's voice came scanning across the grounds. Assistants, here. They ran. Not everyone. Enough. The greenhouse door stood open, heat fogging out. Inside, a tray of pale blossoms had opened wrong. Their pistils curled like hooks. A smell like bruised peaches pressed at the back of the throat, cloying to the point of nausea. A student had toppled into a bench, breathing too slow. 2 more flailed at vine loops with their bare hands. Which was exactly the kind of mistake panic made. Do not inhale, Sprout shouted, hands buried to the wrists in dirt, fighting the main plant into compliance. They've thrown a love-sick cycle. It will pass, but it will make you stupid first. Piper swore, not because the situation scared her, because it insulted her. Whose idea of a joke is this? Aris, Annabeth said under her breath, and the word tasted like a penny on Harry's tongue even without meaning attached. She darted for a waxed canvas tarp and shoved it at 2 Ravenclaws. Smother the tray, not the stems. Leave space to breathe. Will slid to the fallen student and put 2 hands on her sternum, not pressing, just measuring. Too shallow, he muttered, and pulled a vial from his kit. Draught of clarity, 2 sips only. Percy pulled water from the air as if there were always water there waiting to be used. He let it arch into long ribbons that he set like fences between the bench rows. Don't cross the water, he said. It will slow your feet long enough to remind you to think. Harry felt the pull at his heart, a cheap, bright thing that wanted to be used. He refused it. Penned his palm and let a thin pulse roll just enough to set the room back in the right key. Not happiness, not desire, not obedience, focus. The water hummed in tune. The scent dulled. The stupid urge to kiss someone went from humiliating to mockable. Students laughed, the kind of laugh you get when terror breaks and leaves relief behind. Good, Sprout said, not looking up. Now help me not die of a plant I bred. They did. It was messy and unglamorous and very, very practical. Harry held the ring like a promise and cut 3 vines without cutting hands. Daphne, who hated getting her clothes dirty for anything less than necessity, knelt in damp earth and counted seconds between the plant's pulses to time their smothering. Piper ran a line of ordinary string from post to post to keep Pan Ickers from treading where they shouldn't. Percy held a wall of water like a glass screen, unyielding and perfectly still. When it was done, the greenhouse smelled like sugar and soil and someone's quince jam. People breathed easier. No one swooned. Sprout wiped her forehead with the back of her wrist and flapped her hat brim at them. You are all ridiculous, she said, which, in Sprout, meant useful. And you? She squinted at Percy. Wet. Occupational hazard, Percy said. Harry felt the shift at the edges of the room. Not a tear. A rumor forming. Voices starting to reset around this new thing. Demigods helping. Not harming. Students not used. Adults working. No one playing to the contrived panic of a headline. Hold on to this, Daphne said to him, soft and firm. When the evening peace comes, remember what your hands did here, not what your name did out there. The evening peace came. It wore the suit Daphne predicted. Calm fonts, neutral posture, a byline familiar from Reasonable Takes. It requested oversight committees, incident logging, the creation of a joint task force chaired by a respected civil servant whose page contained references to hard conversations and best practices. It sounded soothing. It sounded like it wanted to keep children safe. Harry wanted to hate it and couldn't. He could only dislike how its safety assumed his friends were the problem before they were the solution. He didn't smash plates or storm the Ollery to write back. He went to the library. Daphne followed without being asked. Percy drifted in a few minutes later, slewing off a trail of wet the librarian pretended not to notice. Annabeth pushed a book across the table like a draftboard. Map time, she said. You felt a note under the floorboards. Let's see if we can hear the whole song. They worked until candles guttered down to their last sensible inch. They sketched the village on brown paper, penciled the department's location, noted every spot in the last 6 months where reality had felt thin. Harry closed his eyes twice and told them where the memory tugged worst. Annabeth triangulated and drew a clean line where he'd felt a smudge. Percy tapped a point near the river with his finger and felt for a current that wasn't water. Daphne, who cared for puzzles only when they solved into leverage or safety, found the reason the line bent around an empty plot: old Roman foundations. Buried and enchanted because Romans buried and enchanted everything they couldn't carry. At 11, McGonagall returned, hair slightly more feral, expression vague. Why victorious in that austere way she had when she'd just negotiated for something without losing the part of herself that disliked negotiation. "We have a private understanding," she told Harry in the corridor outside the library. Voice quiet, tired. "The ministry will not publicly sanction demigod presence. It will also not interfere when they save our lives. I had to agree to quarterly briefings and a ban on flamboyance." "Define flamboyance," Harry said. "You'll know it when you see it," she said briskly. Then, after a pause that let the corridor breathe, "Well done in the greenhouse." "It was Sprout," Harry said. "It was all of you," she countered. "That is the point." He closed the library doors after her with the careful quiet of a student who loved the sound of hinges behaving. He went back to the table and the map, where Daphne was writing something small in the margin, notes to herself, not to him. He liked that she didn't make every action a duet. Percy had stolen a lemon drop and looked smug about it. Annabeth pretended not to notice him doing it and placed a pebble on the line he'd drawn as if to weigh it down. "Tomorrow," Annabeth said, "we test the Roman site." "After charms," Harry said. "During lunch," Percy said. "Not during lunch," Daphne said. "People need to see you eat." He surrendered, because she was right and because that was another line he needed held: human first. "Symbol if there's time." They tidied the map. Harry tucked the ring back into his sleeve. The day frayed at the edges in a good way. He could feel how easily that good could be shaken apart by one more clever leak. One more small sabotage, one more person who didn't know the difference between pacification and peace. He committed the feel of the greenhouse to memory like a spell, the exact weight of the tarp. The pink slice of Sprout's knuckles, the sound of string pulled taut like a boundary made visible. On the way to the common room, Daphne tapped his hand once. "You did fine," she said. He thought about saying he could do better next time, about promising more than he had, about making his vow to be perfect where anyone could hear it. He didn't. "Thank you," he said instead. At his door, an owl waited, hackles up like it resented being useful. It held out a leg with the bored contempt of a creature that had never once been impressed by a hero. The percham, end tied to it, contained a single sentence. "When you are tired of reacting, come speak to me about ending the root. CV." Behind the signature, a faint transfer image shimmered for a second, a shem. Attic of the department's outer corridor and a small mark near the door to the veil room. Cassian's calling card without the paper. He had said he'd leave a name, he'd left a breadcrumb. Harry pocketed the note. He didn't feel tempted so much as called to a conversation he would need to have sooner or later. He didn't have to choose tonight. He went to sleep with the map between his bed and the floorboards. Neatly folded where Annabeth's pebble had weighed it, the smell of damp earth still in his sleeves, a boundary spoken twice ringing in his head like a ward that would hold. Snow ticked the leaded windows. Far beneath the city, something old and patient turned. On a roof in London, a man with clean boots and a neat mind drew a circle around a room no one should enter alone and wrote 2 columns on a page: cost and balance. And somewhere a woman of rose and steel counted the beats between a boy's promises and his choices and decided which way to push luck, if she had to. Harry slept hard. No prophetic dreams. No whispering doors. Just a full day laid flat, an unshowy peace earned by doing the right thing loudly enough for fear to hear it and go somewhere else. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Masks and Mirrors. Harry learned 2 things about ministry galas in the space of a hallway. First, that a crystal chandelier can double as a surveillance rig if you hide listening runes under the droplets. Second, that Daphne Greengrass could thread a needle through a crowd without touching a single person. They stepped out of the flow into polished marble and low music. Daphne slid her hand along his cuff as if smoothing lint. "Smile like you're bored," she murmured. It confuses predators who want a reaction. I thought we were hunting, Harry said. We are, she said. Predators hunt too. Percy arrived with Annabeth a beat later, clothes charmed into appropriate black. Percy eyed the chandelier the way a swimmer eyes a strong current, not intimidated, just planning. Pip, and Will drifted in as staff pushed trays of tiny skewers past them. Leo appeared last, already making friends with a sconce. He whispered, "Don't worry, I won't fix the lighting," and Annabeth sighed. Nothing out loud while telling him no with her face. Targets, she said under the music. 3. Undersecretary Muldoon, who keeps saying, "We welcome dialogue," while filing motions to shut it down. Financier Penhaligon, who knows where the money went, and the artist who installed that monstrosity. Harry followed her chin toward the center of the atrium. The piece hung like a silver seed pod suspended on wire filaments. Inside it, threads of glass wound in loops that weren't quite symmetrical. As people moved around it, the loops thrummed. The sound wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It made the hairs on his arms rise. "Tell me you're hearing it," Percy said. Harry nodded. "Same key as yesterday's tear." "Great," Leo muttered. "Someone made a veil sound system and hung it like it's modern art." "Someone wants to normalize the noise," Annabeth said. "Get us used to it." Daphne's mouth compressed a millimeter. "Or test what the noise does to a room," she said. "Go." They split. Piper peeled off first and found a semicircle of staffers fidgeting around canapes. She didn't turn on charm. She turned on attention, listening like each person could be the protagonist of the next minute. They opened without realizing it. By the time Harry drifted past, he'd learned where the undersecretary liked to hold informal meetings, an office with carpet that swallowed sound, where security shortfalls were service corridors that doubled as storage, and who was tired of pretending to like the art everyone. Harry and Daphne matched pace to a string quartet and eased into Penhaligon's orbit. He was the kind of man who dressed like old money without the old. His eyes tracked power the way some men track horses. He sipped something with peel in it and smiled when Daphne sked something innocuous with a mosquito's sting. "Do you collect or invest?" He answered clean. "Both. Collect for history. Invest for the future. And the present," she said. "What do you buy to feel safe now?" He laughed like he admired being cornered and slid sideways to avoid saying anything. "I buy clever young people opportunities to prove me right," he said. His gaze flicked to Harry. It didn't cling. That was more dangerous than fixation. Harry lifted his glass and took the hit. "We're just students," he said, bland as water. Then, because bland rarely opened doors, he added, "who don't like being used as headlines." Penhaligon almost smiled. "Good. Headlines are cheap." Daphne leaned in a fraction, purely to adjust her bracelet. "So are excuses," she murmured. Penhaligon I.N.C. lined his head to concede the point without meaning it. Annabeth ghosted by them and touched the back of Harry's hand quickly, a signal. "Muldoon's moving," she said, eyes firm on a point in the crowd. "We want that keycard." "Where's Aegis?" Percy asked. "In the walls," Annabeth said. "They don't disrupt. They document. For now." They drifted toward the corridor beyond the gallery. Muldoon's shoes clicked in precise counts on the floor. He had the look of a man who had practiced walking the way some practice lies, careful, casual, on brand. Two aides flanked him, identical smiles pasted to different faces. A guard leaned near the staff-only door, bored enough to miss trouble and alert enough to cause it if he thought he saw some. Harry glanced up at the wire-hung art. The harmonic beat inside it shed a pattern that traced itself across his skin. Pause, rise, split, rejoin. He almost had it. Later, Daphne nudged him. "Your job," she said without moving her lips, "is to make Muldoon take one step left without him ever thinking you asked." "That sounds suspiciously like an ethical use," he said. "That sounds like preventing a worse person from ruining a better day," she said. And flashed him a look that said the line still held. He didn't fill the corridor with warm syrup. He didn't tug a string tied to a human mind. He stood in precisely the right place at precisely the wrong time. It forced a micro-adjustment. Muldoon slid left to keep his pace and avoid looking rude. His hip grazed a coat rack. The rack wobbled exactly long enough for an aide to catch it. The aide's hand brushed Muldoon's pocket. The keycard kissed palm. Hand to coat. Coat to pocket. Smooth. Percy stepped into a group of gossiping donors and began an earnest discussion about flood planning in wizard towns that have historically been too proud to learn from rivers. Half the donors nodded because it sounded responsible, the other half nodded because Percy was offensively charming when he talked about the mechanics of not drowning. The guard squinted, distracted by something that wasn't there, a drip that wasn't a drip, a shadow that wasn't a shadow. Will Daedalus had a talent for Harmel's misdirection that didn't change a soul. He used it like a tourniquet. The guard blinked, shrugged, and relaxed his grip on his own key fob. Annabeth slid down the service corridor with Piper. Harry followed 2 steps behind. Daphne 3 after him. Leo circled the far side to meet them at the service stairwell. Somewhere above, the quartet shifted to a tune that made the hairline seam between rooms feel thinner. They ducked into the staff corridor with the ease of people who looked like they belonged anywhere. White tile, steel doors, smell of citrus polish. A custodian wrangled a troll. Wyan gave them the universal look you give kids who insist on being in the wrong place. Sorry, Piper said, authentic contrition in a bow. We got lost. You and everyone else with shoulders and a suit, the woman said. But she moved aside, and Piper used the space like a gift, not a right. Annabeth tapped the security plate. The stolen card blinked green. The door nudged. Inside, a narrow chair dropped to a cold hall lined with crates that all had the smell of things loaned from private collections. 2 minutes, Annabeth said. If it takes 3, we leave Leo behind and come back for him after breakfast. Leo nodded like he deserved that and went straight to the junction box. His hands did something only he understood. The hum behind the walls lowered a half-tone. Harry, Annabeth said, pointing. Second room on the left. Penhaligon's crate. If the paperwork inside shows Aegis as a temporary custodian, we need a picture and a copy. On it, he said. They moved clean and quick. The first room held banalities, trophies, a painting of a ship. The second room held a crate the size of a school desk with 3 seals stamped in gold. Harry opened it and swallowed a curse. Inside, wrapped in layered silk, lay a bronze disc etched with words that hurt to read. Daphne drew breath in that way that concedes all without letting it stop her functioning. Mirror cover, she said. Old Greek. Ritual use. Binding. Unbinding. Reflection. Useful for lining a veil harmonic, Annabeth said, fingers hovering above the metal without touching it. Or interfering with one. Harry didn't touch either. He found the paperwork packet and flipped to the transfer sheet. It read like a legal shrug. Interim custody, stabilization research. The receiving signature was a name he didn't know. The funding source linked to a partnership whose logo looked suspiciously like the Aegis shield if you squinted. Picture, Annabeth said. Piper already had it. Will took a second angle on the signature. Time, Leo hissed. They shut the crate, resealed the seals, wiped any trace of their presence that wasn't dust. On the stairs up, Harry paused just long enough to listen again. Art thrummed like a roomful of throats clearing at once. He heard the map in it. He heard the bend he'd felt in Hogsmeade. In the noise, a scene glinted. He could follow it. He could solve this one piece. He itched to run back and climb the suspended rig and jam the pattern back into silence. Later, Daphne said softly, catching his sleeve as if she'd heard the same itch. Don't give the room a show. They slid out into the corridor like nothing had happened. Muldoon reappeared with a smile that meant nothing. Penhaligon had acquired a new audience. The music turned brighter. The center pie, ECE spun on its wire and made the crowd sway a fraction without knowing why. A reporter stepped into the hall with a quill already poised and a gaze hungry for quotes. She formed the question before she even saw who she was talking to. Do you feel demigod presence at Hogwarts is escalating risk too? Harry stepped forward into the field of the question, palms down, voice even. No statements, he said. Today is for art. Piper slid in. If you want a quote, she said, write this. We did our jobs in a greenhouse full of stupid flowers that tried to steal choices, and no one died. The reporter blinked, recalibrated, and then saw Will and wrote that down too because he looked like a photo editors liked. Names. Not yours, Daphne said smoothly. People do the work better without the weight. The woman glared, but she was a professional and professionals move on when they're not getting the meal they ordered. She turned to the next fish. Harry exhaled. Percy bumped his shoulder lightly, a wordless niece. They lasted another half-hour without breaking something. They made one more pass at Muldoon and learned nothing except that his cologne got stronger near the staff doors. Hay watched Penhaligon write no check but promise 6. They stood under the art as it changed the air around their heads and pretended it was fine. When the crowd loosened and the evening began to taste like dessert, Harry said, "Roof." And Daphne didn't ask why, because she knew his pattern well enough by now to recognize when he needed air that wasn't filtered. The roof was cold and honest. The city looked like a geometry problem spread toward the river. Harry planted his hands on the stone and breathed until the hum in his skull matched the hum of traffic and not the art's hum below. "Vale," he said, "I thought you would enjoy the view," Cassian said from the ledge as if he had been there since late afternoon, which he might have been. He stood with his back to them, posture relaxed, coat open. The kind of balance that said he liked rooftops because walls made him feel cornered. He didn't turn until he finished his sentence. "I like to know where the exits are. Do you ever use doors?" Daphne asked. "When doors aren't traps," Cassian said mildly. His gaze flicked to Harry's hands, to the tension in his shoulders, to the way Piper hovered near the stairwell with Wool, to Th. Eway Percy took 3 steps left while pretending to enjoy the grout. Cassian catalogued all of it without writing anything down. "You executed a clean pull downstairs. You didn't pocket the disc. The old you might have. People change. You don't know the old me," Harry said. "I know the type," Cassian said. "You burn early. Someone hands you a bucket. Eventually you build your own well. It's admirable. It's also how you end up carrying water for gods who will never learn to build." "Careful," Percy said, easy voice, sharp eyes. "You're not wrong often enough to excuse indelicacy." Cassie, and took the hit without displaying the injury. "I'm building a system," he said. "One that slows divine impunity by mathematical friction without requiring me to hate everyone in the room." "You're building something too. Alliances, habits, cultures. These are all good. They fail when the other side cheats. The gods cheat as a reflex." Harry stepped forward. "You don't get to call love cheating." "I don't," Cassian agreed. "I call it leverage. It's useful when you trust the hands on it." He looked at Daphne. "I like your rules. I prefer systems to people, but I respect rules." "You left a schematic under the owl bell," Harry said. "If you like rules so much, stop inviting me to break them." "That wasn't an invitation," Cassian said. "It was a prediction. A bad thing will happen in a room you fancy called Department of Mysteries. You'll be there. So will I. We can either fight on the floor while someone else pulls the thorn, or we can not do that." Piper's head came up a degree. Will's fingers tapped his thigh twice. Annabeth arrived from the stair quietly enough to have been there the whole time. "You're being unusually candid, Cassian," she said. She did not call him Mr. "Why?" "Because whoever hung that piece downstairs doesn't work for me," Cassian said. "And because whoever paid for it thinks the sound of the veil is a song they can conduct. They're wrong. Strife will conduct it. She will win if you play the pretty notes." His gaze found Harry again. "You will be tempted to fix rooms you haven't earned because it feels faster. Don't. If you want help shutting own the people who want to normalize tears, call the number on the card you won't admit you already pocketed." Harry didn't reach for the card because he didn't want the movement to read like weakness. "What's the cost of your help?" "Joint oversight of the artifact once it's contained," Cassian said. "Mortal-controlled panel. No gods. No proxies. You'll hate it." Daphne answered first. "We'll hate it less than you doing it without us." Cassian's mouth turned half a degree. "Then we have the outline of a deal." He stepped onto the ledge as if it were a curb. "I like that you didn't burn Th.E. article this afternoon by grandstanding," he said to Harry. "It means you aren't an addict." Harry flushed because he had been, in small ways. "We're done," he said. "For now," Cassian agreed. He tipped 2 fingers to his brow. "Not ironic. Don't stand directly under art that hums like a door." Then he stepped off the ledge into the night like a man choosing a staircase no one else could see. They stayed until their hands went numb and their tempers cooled. When they went back down, the atrium had emptied to staff rolling carpets and a wizard in shirtsleeves muttering about invoices. The chandelier still glowed. The seed pod still hummed. The room still looked like power-wearing perfume. On the way out, a junior reporter, barely older than Harry, ambushed a demigod kid near the coat ch. Ekin asked a question with barbs. How do you answer parents who say your presence endangers their children? The boy froze. He was brave. He wasn't ready to be a pull quote. Harry stepped in, then stopped himself. He didn't flood the room. He didn't draw the wire. He simply said, I'll take that. The reporter blinked, pleased. Daphne's hand tightened on his sleeve and then let go. I answer like this, Harry said. We're not asking you to like us. We're asking to be accountable together. Today, in a greenhouse, we prevented bad decisions from spreading. We'll do more of that. You can print that or not. The kids saw it. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't strategic brilliance. It was a line he felt all the way down. The reporter scribbled. The demigod kid exhaled shakily and looked at Harry like he owed him something. Harry shook his head once. You don't. Back at Hogwarts, the great hall was warm and loud. Ron lobbed half a roll at him and missed. Hermione had ink on her fingers and a new pamphlet half written about consent magic ethics. She glanced at Daphne, clocked the thread, said nothing. Harry loved her for that discipline. They ate. They told only the parts of the evening that counted. The plant rescue. The awful art, the fact that the world would try to make noise normal and they would have to keep reminding it what quiet sounded like. Percy promised he wouldn't flow. OD the ministry atrium without permission. Annabeth started a list of old Roman sites under London. Piper implied she could get the artist to talk by asking better questions than anyone else. Will fell, asleep upright with his head against a column. Leo, finally, admitted the chandelier was well engineered for eavesdropping, and then swore he hadn't tampered with anything. Later, when the castle settled and the corridors held their usual creaks, Harry took out the card. It didn't have a number on it. It had a word written in clean block letters and a sigil that wasn't magic but wasn't meaningless. Aegis. He tucked it back where it wouldn't burn a hole. He stood at the window and watched the lawn glow with frost and thought about how easy it would be to call and how necessary it might be. And how he wanted to set the terms without pretending he could control everything. Daphne found him there, not sneaking, not apologizing for caring about the angle of his shoulders. You didn't push a single person tonight, she said. Not even when it would have been easy. It wasn't easy, he said. I know, she said, which made the praise worth more than applause. Keep choosing the hard version until it feels like your default. Quote, he nodded. Tomorrow, the Roman site. After breakfast, she said. After breakfast, he agreed. He closed the curtains, pocketed temptation, and slept in a bed that felt like a decision he kept making. Human first, weapon if needed, never the other way around. In the city, a piece of art hummed to an empty room. In another room, a man who liked clean lines circled a date on a calendar and wrote one word next to it, accord, and then underlined it once like he planned to break it before anyone else could. Far below, the veil stirred, not angry, not kind, just old. Eris smiled somewhere people were already arguing, then whispered to the wires so softly even the chandelier didn't hear. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The veil breathes. The door to the Department of Mysteries never stopped being rude. It stood in a corridor that taught you humility by making your footsteps small. Harry ran a thumb along the inside of his sleeve and felt the rings heat settle. A pulse sinking to his heart. Daphne tugged the cuff down smooth and gave him the look she used when the plan had moving parts, a moral edge, and no redose. Say it, she murmured. I make room for choice, he said. I don't make the choice. Good, she said. Don't change verbs just because the carpet looks expensive. Flitwick's charm unraveled the locking lattice with a series of soft clicks like a polite throat clearing. The door decided to be a wall for one last stubborn second and then relented. Beyond it, the circular room waited in its permanent spin, doors winking as if in on a bad joke. Annabeth marked the floor with a wax pencil, little crosses that meant left 3, right 1, count 7 heartbeats between. Percy rolled his shoulders and wiped a palm on his shirt like he did before a swim meet. Piper knotted her hair tighter. We'll check vials. Leo whispered to the metal the way he always did when he needed machines to feel like allies. They stepped in together. The room turned. Annabeth didn't. She kept her eyes on the dark seam over the door they wanted, waited for the precise hinge of rotation, and tapped her toe twice. Now, the door opened to a corridor that absorbed sound. The lights hummed at a frequency Harry felt under his tongue. He swallowed and the pitch didn't change. He could pretend not to hear it. He didn't. Quick, Annabeth said. Quiet. Don't touch anything that thinks. They passed the brain room and didn't look. They passed a room that smelled like dust and lightning. They reached a threshold where the temperature dropped as if an old thing had remembered snow. The veil room waited beyond. Stone like a well, arch like a stripped tree, black fabric stirring in wind that wasn't. Harry hated it and had missed it. Way you miss a scar when it stops itching. His stomach knotted. Percy's hand hovered near his shoulder without touching. You with me? Yeah, Harry said. Don't let me get romantic about death. Wasn't planning to, Percy said. Not my aesthetic. They set up on the rim. Annabeth laying out a coil of thin bronze wire. Piper kneeling to chalk quick sigils that weren't quite Greek and weren't quite wizard standard. Leo opening a velvet roll of tools that looked like he'd made them in a dream, while lining 3 bottles in the order he'd want them when the first decision hurt. Daphne stayed at Harry's side, eyes taking the room apart for angles, exits, everything you'd need in a fire. 2 observers on the catwalk, she said under her breath. Department, not Aegis. Good, Harry said. He kept his gaze level. Looking up invites theater. They can write us up for excessive competence. Annabeth's voice softened. This is not a patch. This is a listen. We mark the harmonics, phi, nd the pattern that's been threaded through them, and follow it to the point where someone is poking the edges. That someone being Iris, Piper said, low, like naming it lessened its appetite. Or a human who thinks they can borrow her. Annabeth said, which is worse? They began. Percy stood at the arch and let water condense from the room's breath. It hung, bead by bead, obeying his hands. He drew a slow line of liquid across the threshold, not touching the veil, never touching the veil, measuring how the air moved when the line hovered. Leo set a tuning rod vibrating against the rim the dais and adjusted its pitch until the room complained less and started to talk. Piper spoke more gently than Harry had ever heard her speak, a stream of numbers and names and memories told like a lullaby designed to keep a restless child from reaching for the wrong toy. Harry didn't push his aura into the room. He tuned himself to what his friends were already making. The pressure in his chest found the seam in the noise and held it apart just enough for Annabeth to map. She drew fast. Scribbles that made no sense until they did. The veil breathed. The breathing had a hitch. The hitch had a shape. The shape had a direction. Someone's pulling a thread out of the weave, Annabeth said, pencil racing. Not enough to unravel it. Enough to make a new line through. Through to where? Will asked. Not far, she said. Somewhere under the city. Under the river. The line bends around Roman stone, then dips into modern conduit. Whoever's doing this knows both languages. Harry felt it then. The taste of copper and old coin, the way a winter sun feels on your cheek when a cloud moves, a laughter he'd never heard and yet recognized as the exact opposite of relief. The veil shifted its weight. Not opening. Bracing. Harry set his palm out, not to block, but to say, I see you. I'm not dragging anyone into you today. The hum sharpened. The corridor behind them coughed out footsteps that didn't try to hide. A man's voice, mild and too clean for a place like this, preceded a team in mad gear carrying cases like instrument coffins. Aegis, Leo muttered, not really surprised. Cassian Vale didn't walk like a conqueror. He walked like a man keeping tempo. I did say we'd meet, he said. His eyes went from the wire to the chalk to the water line to the shape of the room and then, finally, to the veil. He didn't hold the gaze. He never stared at anything that might stare back. We're not here to brawl, Piper said. So if you could resist making today tedious. Cassian lifted a hand. His team froze without looking frozen. No one touches the arch, he said, clear enough for the department observers above to hear. No one moves until the lady with the pencil tells me what she thinks. Annabeth didn't grant him the compliment of surprise. You have anti-channel runes set in your cases, she said. You plan to dampen anything that talks to gods while you take what you came for. Not gods, Cassian said. Channels. I don't like phones that call people who don't pay their share of the bill. Cute metaphor, Percy said. Your timing is worse. On the contrary, Cassian said. If you're going to step into a room where someone is plucking the edge of the oldest curtain in Britain, you should do it while the one man in London who refuses to let idiots die of hubris is holding the switch that turns down the chorus. Let him set his toys, Annabeth told Harry, before Harry could decide whether he wanted to throw him out on principle. We'll hear bet, without the gods leaning on the glass. Cassian nodded to his second. The woman opened a case and tapped 3 flat devices onto the stone at equidistant points around the dais. Runes lit that didn't belong to any set Harry knew. The room's pressure dropped, the way the inside of your ears feels on a plane when the cabin equalizes. Harry waited for the sweet ease of compulsion to creep in at the edges. It didn't. The dampeners didn't make it easier to push, they made it harder to cheat. Fine, he said, but if you cut off Will's link to healing or Percy's to water, we'll even let you manage a tantrum you can't reason with. Cassian didn't bristle, he tapped his earpiece, which he wasn't wearing. Medical is exempt. Hydromancy is physics with an opinion. A quiet smile that said he liked the line even if he didn't admit it. Proceed. They did. Percy's water line shivered and then steadied. Piper changed the rhythm of her words and the chalk brightened. Leo found the spot where. The room's refusal became pliable and marked it with a nick only he could see. Will laid a hand on the stone, listened for human hearts beyond it, and shook his head once, no one on the other side close enough to hurt yet. Annabeth's pencil kept pace. Harry kept space. The veil breathed again. The breath caught, as if something had twined its fingers into the edge and tugged. The tug had intention. It didn't want to open the door. It wanted to thread a needle through the fabric and tie it to a different hook. Underneath Blackfriars, Annabeth said, voice tight with the thrill of getting she right while hating that getting it right meant there was a there to get. Below a maintenance spur, newer construction laid over older. The line terminates near a foundation stone with, she frowned, head tipping, with a second whisper. Not Vale, not now, older. Harry felt the older thing before she finished saying it. A splinter of night that didn't smell like darkness so much as the moment. Just before a fight starts because someone is about to say an unforgivable truth. The breath caught again. A hiss of laughter skated the edge of hearing. The veil rippled. A shape pressed forward from the far side, not a person. Not a full form, the suggestion of a face made of static. Harry slid in front of it without thinking. He didn't tell the room to be calm. He told himself, hold. Percy's water went rigid like glass. The shape pushed again, found no welcome, and tore instead of arriving. Sound folded in on itself. It came out wrong. Will flinched. Piper closed her eyes and leaned into the words like a wall. The shape ruptured into a mouth made of edges. The scream came. Harry had heard banshees. This wasn't that. This was what happens when 1,000 little arguments in a thou. Sand flats collect under a bridge and become weather. The scream scoured. Harry moved. Wand up. Ring out. Not to cut, to interrupt. He targeted the vowel, where the sound flexed, and drove the ring thr. Ow, that point like a spade cutting a root. The scream shuddered. Percy's hand snapped and the water slammed into a curve that caught the shock and bled it sideways along the rim. Daphne threw a say that had no name in any book he'd seen. It hooked the scream and split it like cloth. The shape lunged. It wasn't solid but it found Percy anyway, because Percy was the kind of person rooms look to for instructions when they panic. The edge slid along his shoulder and into his head. His eyes sharpened the way eyes sharpen when a bad thought isn't yours and you believe it anyway. Harry felt the wobble. Distrust has a flavor. Sour. Then sweet. Then flat. The flatness hit Percy like a wave flipping a swimmer upside down. Everything true became a joke. Everything earned became a trick. His jaw clenched. He looked at Harry like he was counting the ways this boy could undo a city with his mouth. No, Harry said, very softly. Not yours. The ring hummed against his palm. He didn't pull the rung. He picked one thing. A memory Percy hadn't shared, but Harry knew the shape of it because waves leave the same marks on anyone who's ever loved a shore. a woman with a tired smile, a kitchen that smelled like lemon. A kid being told bedtime stories about monsters and rules anyway. Harry spoke like he wasn't speaking to Percy at all. His mom wouldn't buy it. Don't you dare sell it. Percy's laugh broke sharp, honest. The thing trying to tip his balance lost purchase. He shook his head once and the flatness slid off like rain. That all you got? Percy told the room. He sounded insulted by the economy of the attempt. He brought the practice blade up and cut through air that wasn't empty, breaking a coil of the sound. It fell and evaporated into quiet. The thing behind the veil tried one more time to be born. Cassian's dampening field held long enough to keep divine interference out of the choice. Piper spoke and the words did nothing and then everything. She told the room it was allowed to be still. Not ordered. Allowed. The veil liked permission. It settled a fraction, enough for Will to slide a stabilizer charm into the seam and for Annabeth to jam a bronze peg into the map she'd made and for Leo to hit that peg with the right kind of spark. The scream collapsed into a breath. The breath disappeared. Silence landed hard enough to be noisy. Harry steadied himself with a palm on cold stone and realized his hand shook. He looked at Daphne. She was pale in a way she never let the public see. Her eyes were still angry, which meant she was fine. Above, the observers whispered furiously into enchanted slates, not sure whom to scold first. Cassian didn't clap. He didn't congratulate. He nodded to his second and she toggled the dampeners down a step. Good, he said, to the room more than to the people. Now we all know what we sound like when we aren't high on God static. Don't pretend you did that for us, Piper said. You did it to prove a point. Yes, Cassian said. Points save lives when they land in time. Annabeth tapped the map. Blackfriars, she said. Foundation. A second whisper. We follow it or we wait to see where it goes next and regret that we thought we had time. Will glanced up at the observers. We don't have jurisdiction, he said. Percy rolled his shoulder, flexing fingers like the last of the flatness was still ringing out. We have responsibility, he said. Call Chiron. Call McGonagall. We move. Not through my corridors, said a new voice from the doorway, crisp and very tired. Unspeakable robes. A thin woman Ho's face wore permanent disapproval and earned every line. You will exit the way you entered. You will file a report through the correct channels. You will not treat this place like a subway. Understood, Annabeth said sweetly. Which was Annabeth, for we'll do it anyway and you'll thank us later. We've already left. We're just catching up to the part where we leave. The Unspeakable's mouth almost twitched. The next time, she said to Cassian, you bring dampeners without letting my office know, I'll staple them to your chair and make you sit in a room with them on for 6 hours while interns complain about their schedules. Understood, Cassian said. He sounded like a man who kept a list of people he respected that he would never admit existed. We'll file a notice. Harry looked at the veil. It looked back the way old things do. Not with eyes, but with patience. He lifted the ring a centimeter and lowered it again. Thanks, he said, under his breath, and then felt foolish for thanking a curtain. They left as ordered. The spinning room tried to be clever. Annabeth was more clever. They stepped into the corridor and the door decided to be a door again. Harry didn't lay until the lift took them up through floors with names he didn't want to read. In the ministry atrium, the fountain didn't throw coins at them. People walked by like workdays heal reality. The air smelled like parchment and coffee and politics. They found a side corridor near a maintenance closet and huddled there for the only kind of meeting that works during a crisis. Short, practical, honest. Blackfriars, Annabeth said. We go now or we lose the line. We go, Percy said. Not all of us, Will said. Someone needs to prep triage and talk to Sprout. If this goes wrong, we'll get SP. Illover through the greenhouse wards again. Take Piper, Daphne said. Her voice calms better than Harry's on civilians who don't trust him yet. She'll hate that I'm right. She'll do it anyway. Piper hated that Daphne was right. She nodded anyway. Call me when you need a street cleared without a panic. Leo with us, Annabeth said. Harry, Percy, me, Daphne, Cassian if he insists. I do, Cassian said. He didn't feel the need to perform a justification. They split on the conditional. Will and Piper peeled for Hogwarts through Flo. Leo, Annabeth, Percy, Harry, Daphne, and Cassian he added out into London like normal people who liked buses and tunnels and the particular anonymity of tired commuters. The river smelled like iron and a story being told and retold until the adjectives wore off. The sky pressed low. Blackfriars sprawled like a ribcage. Annabeth led them down a service stair that asked for a key card. Cassian provided a code that would work for another 12 minutes. The door clicked with the weary resignation of infrastructure made to be ignored. Under the station, real tunnels threaded under the decoy tunnels. Old work met new. Annabeth's wax pencil marks on. The map matched the graffiti line for line. Leo tapped wall and floor and listened. Percy breathed, eyes half closed, like the Thames above him had thoughts and he was eavesdropping. Daphne looked like a girl on a field trip and also like a general. Left, she said, before Annabeth did. Someone cleaned recently. Floors too honest. They hit the clean section and found the reason. A series of metal pylons stood like tuning forks. Thin as lampposts, each wrapped with wire that hummed almost imperceptibly. On the central pylon, a glass prism hung, vibrating. The hum was the same note as the art. The hum was a doorbell. Strife's telephone, Leo said. Do not answer. Annabeth crouched. Don't touch yet. Cassian looked up. 2 exits. 3 cameras. 1 power junction. The line from the Vale terminates here. He pointed at the pylon's base. There's a ground. Whoever built this knows their harmonics. It's not sloppy. Don't compliment her, Percy said. Compliment the work, Cassian said. It helps me see how to break it. The second whisper Annabeth had mentioned became a presence at the edge of the setup. Not a sound. A weight, low and mean, like pressure under a bruise. Harry took 1 step without deciding to. The ring heated and cooled, warning and permission in pulses. Thorn, Annabeth said, very quietly. A piece of something older, lodged where the line wants to go. Harry saw it then. A shard that didn't catch light so much as refuse it. Not big, not showy. He felt the urge to leave it alone with an intensity that made him suspicious of himself. Problem, Cassian said softly. I can contain it. I cannot do that while we are being stabbed by pylons singing to a goddess who eats arguments for breakfast. Then we do the pylons first, Annabeth said. Clean, fast, no drama. They moved. Percy arced a pressurized sheet between 2 pylons so Leo could slide under without a finger's oil touching the wire. Daphne loosed a spell that wrapped a era lens in grime as if the city had lived a month in a second. Harry squared up to the central prism, found the harmonic that made the wire vibrate, and hit it with the ring at the exact wrong moment. For the device and the exact right one for the room. The pylons screamed. The other pylons answered. The hum rose. Harry heard laughter again, soft as a match being struck in another room. Now, Annabeth snapped. Leo yanked a cable free and stabbed it into the ground. The surge ran into dirt instead of up into the air. Percy took the second counsel of his hands and shifted the pressure. The water absorbed the remaining wine. Daphne's spell broke the last camera. Cassian crossed 3 meters like a fencer and slapped a wafer to the prism that made it forget what it was for. The hum died. Eris didn't scream. Of course she didn't. The air lost the brittle shine of a room where future fights were being arranged for convenience. Harry felt the release and hated that relief felt like surrender. He held onto the dislike like a handhold. The shard, Cassian said. They gathered around it and did what adults tell you never to do. They made a decision about an artifact under a city will. E.A. River waited to see if it would become a wall. Annabeth said, containment with joint oversight. Percy said, we hold it long enough to lock the line, then decide whether to bury it or break it. Daphne said, if you bury it, someone digs. If you break it, 1,000 slivers walk away. You chain it to a room where several stubborn people have keys. Cassian said, and I get one of the keys. Harry listened to the shard's pressure. He didn't feel power he wanted. He felt arguments waiting to happen. He turned the ring once on his finger and looked at Cassian. We take it, he said. You carry it, not because I trust you more than anyone else here. Because you were willing to dampen your own edges upstairs. If you go off book, I will take it back. If I go off book, he tipped his head at Daphne, drags me into a lake. Cassian considered the arithmetic. Acceptable, he said. He opened a case that wasn't anti-divine so much as anti-meaning and slid the shard into a sandwich of glass that made Harry's teeth ache. The pressure eased. The room exhaled. In that breath, the tone shifted from war to negotiation. They cleaned their prints, unhooked the wire, left the pylons for later dismantling. Annabeth took her pencil mark and turned it into 3 more follow-ups, favors owed. Percy leaned against a pillar and let the water drop from the air back to wherever it came from. Leo patted a pylon with grudging respect. Daphne checked the corridor twice and then once more for luck. On the way out, Harry felt eyes in the dark that weren't eyes. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Arissa's work never ends with the first move. She'd be waiting at the next dinner, the next byline, the next time a friend misheard a sentence and decided to fight about it. Back in the street, London kept being London. A bus honked at a taxi. A woman shouted into her phone about takeaway. A boy kicked a can along the pavement with a rhythm that fit the new quiet. At the bridge rail, Percy stopped and faced Harry without a joke in his face. "Whatever that shard was doing to me back there," he said, "if you hadn't cut it off." "You would have cut it off," Harry said. "I just reminded you where your balance was." Percy huffed a laugh that had no humor in all of it. "Fine, but if I start snapping at you for breathing wrong, you get to pour water in my shoes." "Deal," Harry said. Cassian closed the case with the shard in it and strapped it to his chest like contraband with a conscience. "Joint custody," he said. "We meet tomorrow to draft the terms." "Tomorrow," Daphne said, "at the amphitheater under London. Neutral ground. And no art." He didn't promise. He didn't need to. He was already amending his plans to include lawyers he respected and arguments he would enjoy losing if the math said so. They split on the bridge. Cassian headed toward a car that would appear from nowhere. Leo hijacked a scooter with a grin that dared the city to be angry. Annabeth vanished into a stairwell that no longer existed for normal people. Percy waited until Harry and Daphne were moving and then walked with them because no one had told him where to be otherwise, and sometimes it's good to be trivial together after you've moved a needle the wrong way and then back. At the castle, McGonagall met them at the doors, hair worse than this morning, eyes alive. Harry gave her the short version. She listened like a strategist and a teacher. When he reached the part where Percy had almost turned mean at nothing, she looked at Percy with too much sympathy to be comfortable and said, "We keep tea in the staff room for shock. If anyone remarks on you being there, I will regret their continued employment." "Thank you, Professor," Percy said, meaning it. She looked at Th.E.Case on Harry's description and winced like someone with a tooth that didn't hurt until you breathed cold air. "Keys," she said. "More than 2. And a safe word for panic in meetings." "Flamboyance," Harry said. "Tired enough to be ridiculous." "That will do," McGonagall said. They ended in the common room full of noise that made sense. Ron asked what was for pudding. Hermione scribbled a nota. ND said she'd started writing a framework for artifact oversight committees and why Hogwarts students were going to draft the first version just to irritate everyone who thought children couldn't. PHNE slid into the seat beside him and stole a chip from his plate. "Half a truth," she said. "We know where and how. Not who. Not why. Beyond the obvious. Aris wants the fight to be the point," Harry said. He rubbed a thumb over the ring like a man trying to clean an old coin. "Cassian wants the rules to be the point. I want people to stop bleeding because of other people's metaphors." "Good," she said. "Hold that." He looked at the fire and the small reflections of ordinary faces on the copper shield above the grate. The veil's breath still lived under his skin. The shard's pressure lived in a case heading toward a room that would make people polite by force of habit. Aris laughed somewhere in a column he hadn't read yet. He chose not to care about her laugh more than the sound of Seamus trying not to choke on a joke. Above London, streetlights pinged on, one by one, unbothered by gods. Under London, a line that had been pulling on the edge of a curtain broke and curled back on itself, looking for a new hook. Across London, a man in a clean coat wrote tomorrow, terms, and under that, smaller, don't forget medical exemption. Harry slid the ring off his finger and set it in his palm. It looked like a circle anyone could wear. It felt like a promise you could only keep one decision at a time. "Tea?" he asked Daphne. "Always," she said. They stood, human pace, and went to boil water. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Circe's Wake. By dawn the coast smelled like old copper and storms that never got the memo. The skiff Percy borrowed from a fisherman who owed him nothing and trusted him anyway slid over a gray-green chalk toward a black stitch of rock where the sea gnawed itself patient. Annabeth pointed past the bow. There, she said, Circe's old atelier. Roman brick over Greek spite. The island didn't show up on maps because maps get embarrassed by places that refuse to sit still. Up close it was a horseshoe cove with teeth, basalt spires, slick stone shelves, a throat of tide running hard enough to make sense of the warning sign no one had posted. A seam of wall hid in the cliff face, the mortar glittering when you looked wrong at it. Daphne pulled her cloa closer and kept her wand in a low guard. She wasn't afraid of the water. She respected it the way you respect clever enemies. Rules? She asked. No illusions that promised to make choices easier, Harry said. No punching the island, Percy added. It hits back. They grounded on a sliver of beach. The air tasted like old wax and something floral that had died beautifully. Annabeth ran her arm along the cliff until a groove found her hand and slid open like a seam letting out a breath it had held for a century. Inside, a tunnel worn by barefoot steps, light drip, the soft rasp of current tea through a hollow it had carved one polite lick at a time. The first room looked like a kitchen until it didn't. Low tables, copper bowls, a hearth choked with ash, shelves lined with amphory that pretended to be empty, a circle tiled into the floor where footsteps had ground the glaze off the pattern. The second room was a library without books, niches cut to hold tablets long since moved elsewhere. The smell of ideas like rosemary when you crush it between finger and thumb. The third room had no patience for visitors. It dropped its jaw and showed teeth. Harry felt the step shift as he crossed the threshold and didn't commit his weight. The floor looked like stone. It moved like a slick-backed creature at rest. He rocked back and the slab he hadn't touched rippled anyway, insulted that he'd guessed. The ripple carried to the far side of the room where 3 bronze mirrors leaned against the wall in a curve that made his eyes want to follow it. Adaptive ward, Annabeth said. It copies your last mistake. Convenient, Daphne said. We'll simply make none. Leo would have been in heaven here. Traps that loved being solved, hinges that liked hands. He wasn't here. Harry had to be clever for both of them. He bent and pressed the ring to the seam between slabs the way you might soothe a skittish horse. The metal warmed. The floor shivered at the temperature change and learned the wrong lesson. Harry stepped where the ripple had ended, not where it began. The floor stayed floor. He didn't smile. He didn't tempt the room with victory. Left, then quarter turn, he said. Copy the echo, not the step. Percy whistled under his breath. This place would love me if I were less charming. You're plenty annoying, Daphne said. She made the step Harry did and then another in the rhythm of the ripple. The room accepted her like a chessboard that had decided you earned the right to move the knight. They crossed to the mirrors. Close. The bronze wasn't bronze. It was the color of old tea. Polished with oil and wrong time. Each reflected them dim, delayed. Harry's hand lifted and his reflection followed a breath late. Daphne's eyes narrowed and her reflection looked pleased before she did. Percy rolled a shoulder and his copy shrugged with a soldier's caution he hadn't learned yet. Annabeth set 3 coins on the base of the central mirror and spoke a name under her breath that Harry didn't catch. The glass hiccuped and showed the cove outside. Their skiff bobbing alone, a strip of sky that had brightened to silver, a slick of water near the mouth of the horseshoe going the wrong direction. Currents, Percy said. He pointed once, twice. That rip is artificial. Somebody's pulling. A wrist, Harry said. Or a clever human who wants a goddess to clap for them, Annabeth said. Both are tedious. A low growl came from the doorway opposite. Not a monster. A man. Broad shoulders under a jacket that fit like armor. Hair hacked short with a knife. A scar that didn't ask for pity. He carried the easy wrong-footed grace of someone who'd spent childhood punching at older boys and learned to like the taste of his own blood. Aegis higher, Percy said softly. Ares lineage. See the stance. Hips forward, head back. He wants to be hit so he can hit harder. The man grinned at being read. He flicked a glance over Harry, dismissed the wand, studied the ring. Potter, he said, pleased. You move like you think 3 steps and feel 5. Harry didn't lift the ring. "You can leave," he said. "Can," the man agreed. "Won't." He rolled his neck until it popped. "Name's Isaac. I was told not to kill you, which is considerate. But I am going to teach you how to lose space." Daphne stepped to cover Harry's flank. "If this is a recruitment pitch, your HR is dreadful." "Not a pitch," Isaac said. He tapped his chest with 2 fingers. "Balance. That's our line, right? This island tilts the table for gods and their friends. I tilt it back. By punching students," Percy said. "By punching whoever's in the room with their hand on a lever," Isaac said without apology. "You want me to be polite about it? Try a different life." He moved first. Not a feint. A simple, ugly rush meant to put Harry on the back foot and keep him there until muscle memory did the kind of work ethics couldn't. Harry met him without wallowing in the room. No pulse into anyone's head. No heat in the bones of the space. He matched the angle of Isaac's shoulder and let the ring clip the wrist instead of the knuckles. Isaac took the pain like a candy and came again. He hit hard. Harry learned you can respect that and still hate it. He gave the man nothing pretty. He kept it tight. Wand as guard, ring as edge, feet where they'd be inconvenient if he fell. Isaac ate a stinging hex and barked a laugh like it tickled. He smacked Harry's wand aside with the flat of his forearm, which was the kind of move that leaves bruises and wins rooms. Harry let him win an inch, then angled left and stole it back. He didn't try for the dramatic takedown. He tried to not get his ribs broken. Percy blocked the doorway with his body and a spine of water pulled from the eye. Aaron hardened for a second into something like a shield. If Isaac went through Harry, he'd still have to get past Tide. Isaac saw it and didn't overcommit. He wasn't stupid. He pressed and pressed until pressure felt like weather again. "Stop waiting on him," Daphne snapped. "Make him late." Harry cut the next exchange shorter than it wanted. He let Isaac think he'd overreached and then stepped in, not out, stealing time. The ring snapped the buckle on Isaac's glove. Isaac snorted, impressed in spite of the annoyance. He switched hands like the weight change pleased him. "Better," he said. Again. They traded in breaths and bruises. Isaac landed a body shot that would have put a smaller boy on the floor. Harry ate air and didn't give him the flinch he wanted. He let the dull pain sit, and made the next choice cleaner for it. He feinted a disarm, didn't take it, palmed the ring back to his finger mid-beat, and used it as a fulcrum to wrench Isaac's blade hand offline. Daphne's spee. LL kissed Isaac's boot and made the sole slick just long enough for his stance to hiccup. Percy's pressure flexed and Isaac compensated without thinking. That was when Harry took the inch. Not a knockout, a cut to the rhythm. Isaac's next strike hit air he hadn't meant to hit. He grinned, annoyed, genuinely pleased. "All right," he said. "Cassian said you adjust. He didn't say you listen. Learn a new verb," Harry said. Breath steadying. Annabeth's voice cut in, cool and golden. "Enough," she said. "This room wants us divided. Isaac, you can keep punching a boy who refuses to cheat, or you can help us shut down a leverage point your employer would rather not see on the evening news when it eats a commuter train." Isaac's eyes flicked to her and back to Harry. He took a half step, then stopped, the war in his jaw visible. "I don't take orders from." "Good," Daphne said. "You'll take sense then." What decided him wasn't moral preaching. It was math. He looked at Harry, at how Harry held his line without bathing anyone in warmth, and saw that he would lose time to get the win he wanted. He turned his blade, flipped it to the dull side, and dropped his hands. "Fine," he said. "Point me." Annabeth pointed. "Mirror to backplate. It's feeding the rip in the cove. Break it without breaking the others." Isaac smashed it like a man who had been breaking the right things his whole life and getting in trouble for doing it in the wrong rooms. The ripple in the stone floor sighed. The mirror's delay vanished. The current in the cove shifted. Percy exhaled, every tendon in his neck loosening at once. "Second room," Annabeth said. "The atelier proper. If the kitchen had been waiting to test your patience, the workshop had been waiting to test your priorities. Tables crowded with old tools. A chalked circle inside a chalked circle, arcs intersecting at off angles like the drafts of spells that didn't trust each other. On a low stand in the center sat a bronze hoop not unlike Harry's ring, cut with glyphs that made your eyes want to skip. Harry reached toward it and stopped an inch before he should have. The room leaned toward his palm like a dog that loved too much. Daphne made a small sound that was not fear. It was recognition. No, she said. You do not want that because you want it. You want it because it wants to be used. Harry let his hand fall. Thanks, he said. Anytime, she said. Keep your fingers attached to your ethics. Annabeth's pencil scratched a quick note only she would understand. We're taking the hoop, she said. It will either stabilize his ring or try to teach it bad habits. I'd like to know which before someone else does. Percy checked the walls for seams that would become doors if you were rude. Isaac pushed a table with his foot and found nothing good under it. Harry wrapped the hoop in cloth that smelled like rosemary and arguments and slid it into his pack as if he were packing a venomous snake and a love letter at once. On the way out, the island tried once more to make itself large. The tide in the throat surged, sucking the skiff at its leash toward teeth. A shape climbed the wet stone above the cove, half dog, half lion. All appetite, with a collar of coins stuck in its mane. Two more scrambled behind it, claws skittering. Chimera pups, Percy said. Hungry and showing off. On our way home, Daphne said. How quaint. They fought ugly and close on the slick stone shelf. Harry didn't decorate it. He cut the first pup off the wall by taking its front paw at the wrist with the ring in a flat strike that rang bone without severing. Percy slammed a sheet of water into the second and pinned it, then let it breathe when it stopped snapping at the air and started thinking about the bad choices that had brought it to this hour. Isaac whirled the length of his blade and used the flat like a shepherd, not a butcher, guiding the third back into a crack it should never have left. Daphne made an arrow bridge of ice over a treacherous gap and didn't crack a joke about it. She watched Harry's footfall and Percy's weight and Isaac's impatience, and she recalibrated without calling attention to she saved them all a twisted ankle. When it was done, the pups vanished the way minor monsters do when they realize the world is not ready to keep them. The tide eased. The skiff banged the rock once, hard enough to bruise, and then settled. They pushed off. The island watched them go without sighing, which Harry appreciated. Halfway to the mainland, with nothing but water and weather to eavesdrop. Percy let his shoulders go and leaned back on the thwart, eyes on the stripe of lighter sky. You okay? He asked Harry. Ask me after tea, Harry said. He flexed his fingers. He'd taken the cost in his right forearm and the dull ache in his ribs. It felt honest. Daphne sat on the gunwale like a cat who trusted the balance of boats. She watched the horizon, then Harry. You wanted hoop like a starving person wants bread, she said. You didn't take it for that reason. Good. I wanted it because I'm tired of losing time to my own limits, he admitted. And because every solution we've made, Cassian, feels like a stopgap. I wanted something that would let me choose faster. Quick isn't clean, she said. I know, he said. I'm not asking for shortcuts. I'm asking to not be late. Then you'll practice until late is bored of you, she said. No rings you can't throw away. No shortcuts you can't say no to. She knocked her knuckles lightly against his knee. Say it. He swallowed pride and relief in equal measure. No rings I can't throw away, he said. No shortcuts I can't say no to. Percy cracked an eye open. I like her, he said. She makes you practice vows like push-ups. I make you practice yours, Daphne said. No drowning the ministry atrium. No flooding atriums. Is against my religion, Percy said solemnly, then grinned when Annabeth kicked his boot. They hit shore with the tide shouldering them in like an ant. Annabeth sent a message to Chiron that was mostly coordinates and the word volatile. Isaac vanished the way competent men vanish when they have complicated bosses. He left behind the ghost of a grin and a bruise-shaped respect Harry did not return and did not entirely withhold. Back at camp, Orissa's rumor had beaten them there. In the mess pavilion, two kids squared off, the kind of chest-out foolishness that makes rooms flammable. The words weren't even original. Aphrodite's boy will bend you, one spit. He'll make you like him and you won't know why. Quote, Harry walked into the heat and didn't pull anything. He put the pack down, set the hoop carefully on the table without making a show of it, and said, conversational as tea. I can't make you like me. I can make room for you to hear yourself. Right now you're hearing a story someone sold you because it makes you feel powerful when you're scared. Do you want to keep that story? Or do you want to keep your pride and walk away with it unsullied by cheap tricks? The boy blinked. He'd expected force. He got options. Pride reached for the thing it likes bees. Choosing something difficult in public. He backed off like he'd meant all along. The other kid rolled his eyes in relief as if he'd been waiting for an excuse to stop. Piper watched from the pavilion post and didn't applaud. Good, she said quietly when Harry reached her. You didn't heal the room. You let it scab. Gross, Percy said, stealing bread. Accurate, Will said, right behind him, toting a kit and a warning look. Sit down, Potter. Show me the shoulder you're pretending isn't on fire. Harry obliged, and Will's hands found the bruise with the unkind kindness of someone who knows the difference between necessary pain and theater. Daphne took the hoop from the pack and turned it in her hands once, twice. She didn't put it on. She didn't let it sit too long in anyone's palm. We tested in a room with adults and buckets, she said. No heroics. Annabeth slid next to her and sketched a fast diagram of word interplay on the back of a napkin. If it amplifies resonance, we'll isolate the frequency that dampens compulsion and cut the one that hums with it. Meaning? Percy asked. Meaning we build a muzzle Harry can wear when the world gets loud, Daphne said. I love wearing muzzles, Harry said dryly. You love not hurting people you care about, Daphne said. Stop pretending otherwise. A shadow fell across the table. Cassian Vale stood there like a problem dressed as a solution. He wasn't alone. A woman with ash blonde hair and a scar that had healed too neat stood at his shoulder, eyes cool and unsurprised. Acceleration, Cassian said by way of greeting. The leak you stopped under Blackfriars forced a new play. The ministry scheduled an Accord summit in 48 hours. We both know it will be sabotaged. We can waste time on outrage or we can set the terms. Neutral ground, Annabeth said. The amphitheater. Already booked, Cassian said. No art. Piper eyed the woman. And you are. Rhea Torv, she said. Aegis operations. I don't like your gods. I like dead kids less. Charmed, Percy said. Don't flatter yourself, she said. Cassian's attention clicked back to Harry with that surgical interest that never felt hungry and always felt dangerous. His gaze slid to the hoop in Daphne's hands and lifted a notch like a man who has just seen the piece that makes the rest of the board make sense. You took a mouth from the island, he said. Tell me you're not planning to feed it. We're planning to leash it, Daphne said. Joint oversight, Cassian said automatically, then caught himself and offered the correction like a concession. Fine, you hold it. I want the right to destroy it if it starts eating decisions. You'll have a vote, Harry said. Not a veto. Cassian accepted the math, not the insult. Summit, then, he said. 2 days. I'll deliver 3 civil servants who can count and 2 who can lie without believing themselves. Try not to make me defend you. Try not to make us defend ourselves from you, Percy said. A corner of Cassian's mouth moved. Respect or exhaustion. With him it was often the same. He turned to go, then paused. I heard about your greenhouse, he said to Harry, as if it were a line item in a report he wished he hadn't found satisfying. Good choice. It wasn't mine, Harry said. It was ours. Cassian flicked a glance at Daphne, Annabeth, Percy, Will, Piper. The circle that had formed without anyone admitting to drawing it. That, he said, is why I'm still here. He left them with the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, only ready. The camp buzz. With rumor and appetite and the sound of targets being set up in the archery lane. A breeze came off the water smelling like iron and lemons. The day leaned hard toward evening like a boxer to a bell. Summit, Annabeth said. Terms. Traps, Percy said. Boundaries, Daphne said, handing Harry the hoop and then taking it back when his fingers tightened the way they did when temptation dressed like solution. Tea before testing. Tea, he agreed, and meant it like medicine, not habit. They drank it bitter and hot on the steps of the big house while the sun turned the lake a calmer color than anyone felt. Harry let his breath catch up with his body. He let the ache settle. He let the day file itself. He didn't look ahead to speeches and sabotage. He looked at the width of the stairs and the space beside him where Daphne had decided to sit and the way Percy kept stealing biscuits and Annabeth kept pretending not to see. When he finally slept, it was with the hoop locked in a trunk with 4 separate charms. A mundane latch, and Daphne's plain warning laid over the whole mess like a wet cloth cooling a fever: no rings you can't throw away. He dreamed nothing useful, which was useful in itself. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Broken Arrow Accord. The amphitheater breathed damp and history. Stone benches curved down to a floor of stamped earth where Romans once argued abo. Oot taxes and sacrifices, and whose idea of order won. Today, wands and spears and municipal lanyards shared sightlines. No banners. No art. Cassian had insisted. Annabeth had checked every arch. Daphne had rewritten the seating plan twice until choke points favored civilians. Harry walked the stairs with Percy at his shoulder and felt the room weigh him. Ministry aides with tight smiles, hunters in gray. Camp counselors in orange under winter coats, 2 unspeakables counting exits, Aegis operatives stationed as if they'd always been there. He kept his hands visible. He had learned to walk like an answer that didn't push. McGonagall stood at the floor's center with Chiron projected beside her in iris shimmer. The centaur's calm pulled focus without asking. McGonagall's voice did the rest. Welcome. This is a working summit. We are not performing for headlines. If you are here to posture, the exit sits where it always has. A low ripple. People arriving at their reasons. Cassian Vale S. Lid to the edge of the floor and set a case on the ground as if laying down a rulebook. Rhea Torv posted herself 2 rows up, watching angles. Penhaligon chatted with the undersecretary in a tone that sold insurance to the already insured. Piper, Will, and Leo mixed through the tiers, one ear tuned to breath, another to the shard locked in an Aegis vault across the city, third to Eris if she tried to scratch the day. Daphne leaned close enough for the words to be private and still shared. If this tilts toward rhetoric, tilt it back. Short sentences. No metaphors you can't cash. I make room for choice, Harry said. More to check his own spine than to reassure her. Don't make it comfortable, she said. Make it clear. McGonagall motioned. We begin with a common map. Annabeth stepped forward, spread a parchment, and spoke in clean nouns and verbs. Tiers identified, countermeasures tested, incidents prevented. She didn't hide losses. She didn't decorate wins. The amphitheater listened like a lung. The undersecretary waited for a lull and slipped in a sentence that sounded reasonable. Given the frequency of these incidents, we must consider restricting demigod access to Hog Warts and allied sites until oversight. Percy didn't bristle. He didn't need to. He pointed at 3 places on the map. Monsters crossed here when demigods were 60 miles away. They crossed here when Aegis was mid-brief. They crossed here because someone hung a harmonic pylon under a bridge and called it art. He met the undersecretary's eye. Cause is not proximity. A hunter with tired show. Ulders and a voice like clear water added, and if you forbid girls who've bled in the snow from walking your halls when the sky tears, you will watch your halls fill with names you read at funerals. Not threat. Fact. Penhaligon raised his hand as if he chaired a board. Money follows governance, he said pleasantly. If you want resources, you will create a body that answers to mortals only. No divine proxies. Cassian didn't need to say he agreed. He had already written the charter in his head. He angled his chin at McGonagall like an invitation to be pragmatic. McGonagall's gaze slid to Harry. Not to hand him a microphone. To measure his line. He gave her a nod that meant not yet. Annabeth moved to the second board. Terms of a narrow accord to cover crisis response. Chiron's projection watched the edges of the crowd. Eyes going soft when arguments got personal and hard when they got lazy. Will stood near the healers, station counting bandages and faces. The first crack sounded like an audio test. A hum whispered along the outer tiers, too polite to be noticed unless you remembered the Vale's key. Piper's head snapped up. No devices, she said to Rhea. Checked, Rhea answered. We swept twice. Leo swore under his breath. It's not in the walls. It's in people. Eris didn't arrive in a swirl. She arrived in decisions that nudged wrong. A prefect who'd never heckled anyone muttered something barbed. A hunter bristled at a word she wouldn't usually hear with malice. An Auror rolled his eyes at a grieving parent. The ripples found edges and sharpened. Cassian touched his earpiece that wasn't there. Lock outer gates, he told no one the room could see. No one in or out until we stop the spread. Don't seal it, Annabeth said. A locked room makes better fights. A flicker cut the light above the eastern stairs. Then another on the west. 3 figures appeared at once. The same smirk, 3 different angles, gold thread braided into dark hair, eyes bright with the pleasure of watching matches strike. Eris wasn't tall or loud. She was beautiful like a reflex, like raising your hands to catch something you should not. 2 illusions. 1 not. Piper narrowed her focus. Real one is center left, she whispered across the net. McGonagall had authorized between their group. A string and tin can lattice built out of 3 spells and 1 stubborn promise. The others reflect poorly. Harry didn't look at Eris. He watched the crowd. Strife worked small before she worked big. A student whispered to a demigod, "You'll make us love you." A demigod whispered back, "You already do." Both flinched at their own mouths. McGonagall's wand flicked. The floor rang like a bell. "Enough," she said. Eris's illusions smiled and became more convincing. The hum spiked. The amphitheater tipped toward spectacle. Harry stepped forward and felt the moment a speech would become seduction, even if he tried hard to be good. He swallowed it. "No address," he said to Daphne. "No address," she agreed. Instead he lifted his hand and let a thin, narrow corridor of calm cut through the center rows, floor to top. It didn't tell anyone what to feel. It told feet where not to stampede. It made a lane. Piper mirrored him on the west and set a quiet around the child section, where first years huddled between older students wearing brave faces. "We'll lit the healer's station" with a gentler hum that said "breathe here." Eris pivoted. Her illusions fanned into the cheap seats where security lapses lived. Cassian beat her there. He toggled the amphitheater doors to hold, not lock, and rerouted power to floodlights so bright the shadows had no seams to hide in. Rhea split Aegis operatives by triads, 1 to eyes, 1 to hands, 1 to mouth, and sent them to stand near the men who wanted to start fights and dared them to try. Annabeth called targets. Leo found the source of the hum. Small amulets tucked into lapels, innocuous as a commemorative coin. He shunted the frequency into a hiss that made the amulets feel like a bad fashion choice. 2 executives took theirs off because discomfort outranked malice. The room sighed as a tiny piece of the machine lost teeth. The attack changed shape. No more hum. Whispers instead, carrying just enough truth to stick. "Why are we negotiating with children? Why are you trusting people who can steer hearts? Why should demigods give their lives to clean up wizard messes? Why should wizards trust kids whose gods have leveled cities?" Voices sharpened because doubt is sharper than hate. Eris fed where nuance lived. A glass thumped over in the 3rd row. The man who'd kicked it started to snarl, bit the snarl back, then snarled anyway because pride hates being told to behave. He swung at the demigod beside him. Percy got there last and still first. Catching the fist mid-flight, holding it gently, speaking low. "Don't give her the joy," he said. "She'll take it and come back for dessert." The man sagged, embarrassed. "I don't even. Why did I say that?" "Because you're human," Percy said. "Congratulations. So are we. Sit down." Eris watched, amused, eyes crinkling at the corners like a girl at a party she planned and ruined. The real her turned her head as if to listen to the gap under the seats where the river's far pulse bled through stone. Harry felt that listening like pressure behind his molars. "Annabeth," he said. "She's tied her net to the water table." Annabeth's pencil scratched 3 quick X on the map in her mind. "Percy, can you set a counter current through the drains without drowning the rats?" Percy closed his eyes and let his hands find a tide no one else could feel. He smoothed the pull under the amphitheater into a lazy eddy that took the edge off strife and turned it into boredom. A fight that had been about to start turned into an argument about sandwiches. Eris clicked her tongue. "Cheater," she said to Percy, conversational. "Men who talk to rivers ought to be immune to charm." "I don't charm," Percy said. "I irrigate." Laughter. Welcome as rain. It split her momentum. She adjusted. 3 illusions crossed, traded places. Piper's smile went feral. Middle. Harry walked down the center lane he'd made and stopped exactly where stepping closer would tip the room into something he didn't want. He looked at Eris and said nothing the first time. When he spoke, he aimed it at the crowd. Not at her. "I won't use my voice to drum you into agreement," he said. "So you're going to have to do something harder than clap. You're going to have to decide." Groans. Relief. Scowls. Laughter. Anger. All appropriate. He didn't ride any of them. Here are facts that don't care how you feel, he said, clean as he could make it. Cheers happen with or without demigods. Wizards cannot fix them alone. Demigods cannot fix them alone. Aegis will fix some and break others. All three bodies have blind spots. The only way this stops being a tragedy machine is if we be something that forces us to share the cost and the credit. He looked at Cassian, and to enforce it even when it cramps your style. Cassian didn't blink. Oversight with teeth, he said. Cross-signature on artifacts. Public after-action reports with redactions only for living sources, and I'll demand proof for each blur. Medical exemption, will called. Healers answer to triage, not committees. Agreed, Cassian said instantly, which surprised no one who'd seen the list in his pocket. Education carve out, McGonagall added. Students are not deployable assets. If you write policy that treats them as such, I torch it. Quote, language we can live with, the hunter said. We don't kneel to ministries. We'll partner if respect is real. Penhaligon lifted his glass as if toasting. Funding with benchmarks. Daphne cut him without touching him. Benchmarks that measure saved lives, not column inches. The room sat on a precipice between becoming a conversation and a riot. Eris breathed in like a girl preparing to blow out candles across the cake. Then she cut the lights. Not the lamps. The feeling of certainty. For 3 seconds, no one trusted the person beside them to be real. That's all it took to start a stampede. Harry shoved everything he was into a single, unglamorous decision. He did not pour warmth into minds. He did not ease fear out of spines. He spoke lanes, not into ears, into bodies. Left is clear. Down is safe. Over this bench. Hold your friend's sleeve. The words weren't words. The aura carved. Piper locked the children's section under a quilt of stillness. Will threw a glow over the healers, corner that made panic feel silly if you approached. Percy's counter-current pulled people along the right aisles. Annabeth raised her voice in crisp, named directions. Hunters, west exit. Aurors, east, Aegis, stay the line. Professors, take middle stairs, no wands out unless needed. Cassian flicked the floodlights to full and held them there until eyes stopped lying. Rhea barked a single command that snapped operatives from fight stance to shepherd stance. McGonagall's voice cracked, a sound Harry had never heard, and then steadied with the fury of an old lion. Prefects, counts, staff, marks. The stampede didn't start. It thought about starting, remembered a day it had learned not to, and settled into rough movement with minimal bruises. Eris, annoyed and curious, stepped closer. Or the illusion did. She sniffed the air like a gourmand. You can move a room without moving a mind, she said to Harry, interested now in a way that felt personal. They still chose. Delicious. Go play somewhere without children, Daphne said, voice like a knife set down with care. Eris looked at her as if deciding whether to be offended. Then she shrugged. You will never know if you did the right thing, she told Harry like a gift. But you will always know if you made it easy. That's almost as good. Get bored of yourself, Percy said cheerfully. She smiled. The illusions winked. The hum died. Silence returned in the rude way real quiet does, full of shuffling and afterthoughts. People stared at their own hands like traitors and then apologized to the nearest person for something they couldn't articulate. The amphitheater, stone, ribs, rules, steadied. McGonagall did not restart with a speech. She started with a list. We will write the accord in the next 2 hours. It will include joint incident response, artifact oversight, medical exemption, student protection, clear jurisdiction for tear sites, department, Aegis, camp, Hogwarts, shared by rule not whim. Anyone who can't live with that may leave. Anyone who leaves will read about what we agreed in the morning. People who enjoy being powerful more than being useful drifted out, pretending the day bored them. People who liked being useful stayed. Penhaligon stayed. Money follows gravity. The undersecretary stayed. Power follows opportunity. Hunters stayed as a block. Aegis stayed because Cassian hadn't moved and Rhea would have tripped anyone who tried. Camp stayed because Chiron's eyes asked them to. They worked. Not pretty. Necessary. Annabeth put clauses where human laziness would try to cheat. Daphne watched the verbs and set shall where may would be in escape hatch. Will wrote the medical carve out with an angry elegance that made 3 civil servants tear up and pretend it was dust. Piper inserted a line about public education when rifts made neighborhoods behave strangely. She would build that class later whether the ministry paid her or not. Percy wrote a provision about rivers that made wizards roll their eyes and then admit the earth itself needed a vote sometimes. Cassian wrote teeth, not to bite allies, to bite intent. Cross-border pursuit requires 2 signatures, 1 mortal. 1 mortal, he said dryly to the room. Don't smuggle your god under your jacket. He added a clause that said artifact custodies rotated so no one house could make a private museum under the pretense of safety. Harry spoke less than anyone expected. When he did, he asked questions that made people show their math. He refused one clause that let morale operations work on large groups. He accepted one that let calming measures create space for evacuation as long as they were narrow, time-limited, and published in the after-action report. He wrote his aim next to that one because owning your own leash matters. They reached signature. McGonagall held the parchment like a thing a storm might pry from her fingers. She didn't smile. Done, she said. Now we test whether paper can hold people. Paper plus teeth, Cassian said. Don't forget the teeth. Plus culture, Annabeth added. Don't forget that either. They broke for air. The amphitheatre emptied into a tunnel with a smell like damp rope. Percy sagged against a column, grinning the way fighters grin when the fight leaves their bones late. Chi, he said to Will. Chi for shock, chi for victory, chi because we're alive. Will said, get used to it. Harry found the edge of the arena and watched the last of the crowd go, then looked up to the tier where Oris had stood. No echo. Good. He didn't want to carry her voice into dinner. Daphne joined him, posture loose in the way she gets only when a room has finally stopped trying to tilt. You didn't seduce a single person, she said. Not even the easy ones. It wasn't easy, he said. It never would be. Good. Keep it hard, she said. Soft smile. That's what makes you trustworthy. Cassian approached without his case, hands empty. He waited until Harry looked at him. You cut lanes instead of mines, he said. Hold that habit. When you fail, fail small. High praise, Harry said. Clean math, Cassian corrected. The thorn is stable for now. I will brief your professor and mine on a rotation schedule. We'll send a committee of people you don't like, Daphne said, sweet as arsenic. Excellent, Rhea said, joining them. Then everyone will behave. Percy trotted up, a paper cup in each hand. He passed one to Harry and saluted Daphne with the other. To doing the right thing loudly enough that chaos finds a different party, he said. You give good toasts, Daphne said. I practice, he said. They left the amphitheater to the Romans and the rats and whatever old god listened to arguments and kept score on stone. Above ground, London sounded like buses and pigeons and the Thames throwing its weight against pilings. Harry breathed city air and liked that it didn't care he had a ring in his sleeve. Back at Hogwarts, the Great Hall buzzed not with panic, but with the bright gossip that follows a near disaster dodged. Hermione had already obtained a draft of the accord through means legal ND otherwise and was marking it with 3 colors. Ron asked if any snacks at the summit had been edible. Harry said no and Ron looked vindicated. First year's shot him looks like he'd held the roof up with his hands. He passed the soup and tried not to be an edifice. In the quiet after dinner, he and Daphne found the corridor with the window that showed the black lake like a bruise. Snow freckled the surface. A giant squid tentacle peeped and retreated. He leaned on the stone, ring warm. Oris will come back harder, he said. Different angle. She'll go smaller, Daphne said. A rumor in a dormitory. A teacher's bad day amplified. A parent with an op-ed that lands because it's almost true. I hate almost true, he said. Me too, she said. That's why we watch language and we drink tea and we don't kiss in public until you can be sure it isn't your aura making it easy. He laughed, soft and helpless. Romantic. Adult, she said, and the word sounded better than romantic anyway. He sobered. Thank you for dragging me to the harder choice. You walked, she said. I just pointed at the ground. He turned the ring once and let the heat settle. He felt tired in the honest way that comes from spending courage. Not from proving a point. He counted the people who had made the day possible. McGonagall's spine, Chiron's patience, Annabeth's blueprint mind, Percy's current, Piper's truth, Will's angry calm. Leo's hands, Hunter's who chose restraint, Aegis who chose to shepherd instead of strut, Cassian who chose boring good over elegant disaster. He closed his eyes and made a small promise only he could enforce. No spear made of love. No lies dressed as safety. Then he opened them because there was more work to do and sleeping on your feet makes bad habits. Far away, in a room with clean lines, Cassian filed the accord with a clerk who didn't look up and then sat down with Rhea to write an operational memo titled How Not to Break This on Day 1. Far below, Vale breathed like a big animal in winter. Somewhere, Eris tried a new rumor and found it tasted less like sugar than she liked. She licked her teeth and planned a sharper one. Harry walked Daphne to the common room door and didn't go in. Night, he said, ordinary as buttered toast. Night, she said, and left him there with the knowledge that the day had not made him larger or smaller, only steadier. He took the long way back to bed, letting the castle creak and settle around him, letting the ring cool, letting his own skin stop buzzing from being an instrument in a room full of noise. In the dormitory, Seamus snored. Neville dreamed of greenhouses, Dean drooled into a pillow, Ron muttered about sandwiches. Human sounds. The best kind of silence. Harry slid under blankets that smell lead like soap and clean wool and told himself one more boundary in the dark. I make room for choice, he whispered to the ceiling. I don't make the choice. The words felt like brushing his teeth. Habit you skip at your peril. Sleep found him quick. No prophecies. No whispers. Just the slow work of a body knitting micro tears, of a mind shelving a day, of a heart remembering what it is for when the room hums and someone tries to make it easy. Chapter 7. Heart of the Labyrinth. London blinked, and the city's veins changed direction. The first sign lived in the sound. Trains drummed the wrong beat. Traffic lights held red too long, 1,000 small weights stacking into a pressure headache you could feel in your teeth. Annabeth looked up from the street map and swore softly. She's folded it, she said. Eris pulled a labyrinth spur under the river. Percy cocked his head like a man listening for the tide in a metal pipe. It's moving, he said. Not walking. Rolling. Like a gear that wants to chew the city. The second sign was plainer. 5 names went silent at once on 3 different networks. A hunter liaison, a ministry pragmatist who liked results, a junior healer too honest for his own career. A Chaldean scholar with pockets full of chalk, and a boy who had been brave in the wrong place earlier this year. Not dead. Disappeared. Subway geometry, Leo said, grim. Mazes love grids. Then we go, Harry said. He didn't reach for the ring. He reached for the rules. We rescue without wrecking the city. Always so romantic, Daphne said, shouldering her pack. She took the lead anyway. They started at Blackfriars, where the river smelled like iron and old stories. The last door Cassian had used opened again. Code, wire, the quiet courtesy of infrastructure. The chairs dropped into concrete sweating cold. Pipes sang. The wall stenciling lied. No access. The labyrinth didn't appear as a door. It was an angle that didn't add up. Annabeth found it by the shadow it didn't cast. Traced the mismatch with her pencil, and pressed her thumb against the seam. Stone softened like wax in a sun you couldn't see. The opening pulsed once, welcoming anyone who had the wrong kind of curiosity. No one gets separated, Will said, voice professional. If you can't hear me, you shout twice. If you need a binder, you take it. Today's not the day to be heroic about pain. Copy, Percy said. Also, cool nurse voice. Shut up, Will said, fond. They entered without ceremony. The first bend was Roman brick married to Victorian maintenance, clean and stubborn. The second bent in a way geometry hates. Pipes grew out of brick like roots out of rock. A wall caved in where no soil lived. The third corner smelled like hot pennies. Harry set his palm to the air and felt the labyrinth's mood, playful. Hungry, proud of its own tricks. Don't flatter it, Daphne said, reading his face. He grinned, chastened, and kept the compliments in his pocket. The corridor opened into a chamber with 4 choices. Each door wore an invitation. The labyrinth loves making you choose wrong by wanting to be good at choosing. Annabeth tossed 4 pebbles. Each vanished at a different door. She listened to the clink one never made. Right north, she said. The others eat their own steps. Leo slapped a small device on the wall, a chirping bug that became silent in rooms where reality thinned to threads. It sang steady here. Good. They jogged. The next corner tried a memory trick. They stepped into a Hogwarts hallway. Stone, tapestries, the hum of 1,000 lives. Furs. Year ran past with ink on their fingers. Sun painted the floor. Harry's heart caught. Honest and sudden. He felt the labyrinth grin. It wanted the hit. It wanted him to soften and make a wrong turn for home. Daphne touched his elbow. Don't mistake a picture for the thing, she said. He nodded and pushed forward. The tapestries flapped, the labyrinth's version of a sulk, and dissolved into brick again. They took 2 more turns. Then 3. The floor tilted and leveled. Water lapped somewhere. Not river, old cistern. Percy found it with his nose. Aqueduct, he said. Roman bones. They found the first captive at the end of a spear corridor. The junior healer, gagged by vine, wrists red where rope burned skin. 2 automata stood guard, bronze torsos with lion heads and hands like scythes. Their eyes tracked motion, not heat. Annabeth measured their swing without moving and drew a line with her finger over the floor tiles. Stay in these 3, she said. If you step on that one, it spins. Leo leaned around the lion nearest, winked, and tapped a panel just below the collarbone. Hey there, handsome, he murmured. The lion shuddered and froze. Hephaestus hack, he said. Annabeth's mom stole the manual a while back. Percy slid between blades that didn't move anymore and cut the healer loose. Will took him, checked his pupils, got 2 matching snaps, and fed him something bitter and crisp. The boy's eyes cleared. Where? Moving, Will said, steady. You're not bleeding out. That's an upgrade. Hold this and breathe when I say. They kept going. The labyrinth's mood turned coy. It tried smaller tricks. The smell of Molly Weasley's kitchen, a chime that sounded like the Gryffindor stairs, the low snap of a cat's tail. Daphne slapped them aside with a look and a breath. Piper's voice wrapped the aura of home in plain speech. We'll go back, she said to the hall that wasn't. Keep the beds warm. The second captive hung in a room suspended by chains. A hunter stow, OD on a platform the size of a small table, arms loose, face pale from stillness. At the floor, a ratchet wheel yanked at the chains. Snag, release, snag, time to the thrum of generators someone had installed in the walls. Wait, puzzle, Annabeth said. She can't move without dropping herself. Or we smash the wheel, Leo said, already shaking out a tool. Wheels load bearing, Percy countered, eyes on the sag. Harry felt the room measuring them like a tailor. It liked Percy's impatience. It liked Leo's hands. It would punish both. He looked for the trick under the trick and saw it, a second chain hidden in shadow. Designed to snap if anyone looked only at the obvious. 2 points, he said. Leo kills the hidden chain first. Percy, give me a 2-second hold when the wheel catches. Piper met the hunter's eyes. Keep your knees loose. The hunter grinned like she hated needing help but loved being seen. Kill the ratchet, she said through teeth. My feet are dying. They got her down without drama. Will checked her pulse. She quoted a curse and then apologized for wasting breath. Eris, she said, steadying. She was laughing, not loud, like a girl who just broke a toy and liked the sound. Keep that for later, Annabeth said. We'll make her choke on it. 2 more turns, and the labyrinth sweetened the air. It smelled like wax and lemons and fresh book glue. The 3rd captive sat at a desk writing lines. I will wait my turn. I will wait my turn. The quill wrote when his hand stopped. The ink didn't stop. His eyes were blank in the precise way of people who've been told they are safe when they obey. Harry's stomach tightened. He remembered a cupboard and rules that kept the house quiet. He didn't crush that memory into pity. He used it for aim. Piper, he said, can you make the room hear its own lie? Piper stepped up, dropped to one knee, and kept her voice conversational. You're not in trouble, she told the boy. You did everything right. Now you get to stop. Give me the quill. The room resisted. It liked the rhythm. Harry did not shove. He thinned the pressure at the boy's elbow, the little space where must becomes maybe. The boy inhaled, blinked. and released the quill like it had been a snake. Piper caught it, snapped the feather, and the ink dried like a pond in August. "Walk," Will said, catching the boy's arm. "Blink. Drink." He handed over water. The boy drank like he'd forgotten how. Good. They hit the first real fight in a hall that narrowed to fists. Chimera dogs poured out of crawlspaces, teeth clicking, tails sparking. Daphne conjured a low rail of ice, forcing them single file. Percy's water smashed the first into the wall as a warning, the second took it and turned tail. The third went for ankles and got a ring blade instead. Flat and sharp enough to sting pride. Leo barked laughter. Get a job. They moved. The labyrinth didn't like being beaten by decent coordination. It got mean. The walls started whispering in voices they recognized. You'll never know if it's you they love. You'll sell your choices for applause. You're a boy with a ring playing adult with a leash. Boring, Daphne said, ruthless. Say something new. The floor lunged. Harry caught himself and tasted metal. A narrow bridge rose from nowhere. Daphne glanced at Harry and didn't touch him. Your rules, she said. Choose. He chose not to flood the bridge with calm. He took the step and let his heel wobble and didn't rescue his own balance with power he hadn't earned. He made his foot honest. He made the next one clever. Percy followed with the ease of a boy who spends spare hours on docks. Annabeth went like a cat. Piper didn't look down. Will scowled at the drop and got over it by swearing at the engineering. Leo muttered, rude, and then tickled a seam until the bridge behaved. At the next junction, Aegis found them. Rhea Torf slid out of shadow like a knife out of a sleeve. Two operatives ghosted behind. Cassian came last, not out of caution but to count who was already safe. His eyes flicked. Will's kit, the hunter's balance, the boy's hand twitching around a cup. 4 recovered, he said, not asking. 2 deeper. We have a pulse on the last 2, Annabeth said, tapping the map in her head. Aris pulled them into a memory hall. It wants to turn the rescue into theater. Then we ruin the show, Cassian said. We go quiet. Your men are loud, Percy said. They'll be louder if they die, Rhea said. We'll manage. They went together. It didn't feel like a truce. It felt like math. The corridor narrowed again. Brass plates studded the walls at head height, resonating to the frequency of panic. Harry kept his palms open. He could have smoothed the way without anyone noticing. He did not. He counted doorways. The memory hall had 3 stages set like cheap theater. A childhood kitchen, a school corridor, a funeral parlor. 2 captives stood in the first and third, unseeing, each enacting something ugly with clockwork accuracy. Don't touch them, Annabeth warned. It sticks. Piper took the kitchen. She chose the smallest thing, the kettle's whistle, and turned it off. The kitchen didn't like the silence. Neither did the memory. The captive's hands faltered. Piper stepped in and started washing a cup, casual as a sister. You don't have to finish, she said. Leave a mess. See if the sun still rises. It did. The captive blinked, not all the way free but enough to step out of the loop. Will took him, hands steady. Rhea walked to the funeral parlor and stood next to the casket like she'd done it before. You don't owe the dead your breath, she said, brutally gentle. Take it back. Walk. The captive walked. The school corridor was for Harry. The door had been transfigured into something that didn't open without permission he didn't have. Dudley's shadow stretched across it, bigger, sloppier, harmless now and still not harmless in certain corners of his head. The corridor murmured. Wait your turn. Keep quiet. Maybe it will be easier next time. Harry set his ring on the door and didn't cut it. He said, no, like he meant it to himself. The door blinked. Into whatever it had always been. Cheap wood, lock that never worked right. He pushed it. It swung. The room groaned, deprived of its petty victory, and gave the captive back. Good, Daphne said. It wasn't praise. It was an audit coming back clean. They had them all. That should have ended it. Aris doesn't like neat exits. The corridor behind them filled with a sound like a crowd deciding it wants blood. The labyrinth's floor plates vibrated. The bronze lions from the first room returned with new friends, dog heads this time, valves steaming. Automata swarmed. On the catwalk 2 levels up, Cassian's team clipped tethers and dropped, landing in a crouch that barely scuffed dust. Ray's blade took one lion's jaw off like she'd been practicing on better opponents her entire life. Go, Cassian said to Annabeth. Get them out. I'll hold this with Jackson. Percy twirled his practice blade like a conductor setting tempo. Don't get romantic about dying, he said. Cassian's mouth tipped. I'm allergic to it. Annabeth peeled the rescued into motion with Will and Piper shepherding. Daphne stayed. Of course she did. Harry didn't argue. He heard the wrongness push at Percy again. The shard's flavor, sour-sweet. Perseus Jackson, the part of him that resents runes that do not obey water, bristled. Harry stepped to his flank and said, evenly, not today, and Percy huffed out a laugh. They fought the room, not the monsters. Cut the angle where the automata fed on pressure. Broke the plate that sent them commands. Leo reappeared on a ledge and shorted a loop with a grin that whoa. I'd get him killed someday if his luck ran out. Rhea moved like a bad thought. Cassian moved like a decision. Harry's ring sang, flat, fast, always toward the seam rather than the show. Then the core. Idar's spine cracked and the floor fell away to reveal a maintenance river roaring beneath. Sewage, runoff, rage. Percy's eyes lit like a man who had been handed the right tool. He raised a hand. The water surged up like a wall, then formed a bridge in the space of a breath. 2 at a time, he said. No posing. They ran. Automata tumbled into the slurry and vanished. Harry got the last captive. Across and turned to see Cassian squared up on the far ledge in a narrow causeway above the rushing dark. Cassian's second slipped. 1 foot, a curse, a bad angle. The tether held. The anchor didn't. She dangled, kicking for purchase. Rhea went belly down and reached without thinking. A bronze jaw snapped inches from her wrist. Cassian had the shot to slice the jaw and didn't take it. He stepped into the thing's bite and shoved the head sideways with his forearm and drove his knife up under the hinge. It jammed. He took the hit to the shoulder, grunted, ignored pain like a man who had decided his body would file a complaint later. He hauled his second up with his other hand, then turned to Harry like the last 30 seconds had been a math proof. We're leaving, he said. Harry didn't argue. He also didn't miss the quiet way Cassian had chosen. Not elegant, clean. They sprinted through a last coil of corridors and out into a stairwell that belonged to London again. The labyrinth snarled and then let go. Not because they'd beaten it but because game's end. Outside, air tasted like exhaust and winter. Sirens far away, pigeons too near. Will checked pulses, pupils, breath rates, rib cracks. The hunter clapped Percy on the shoulder and told him he moved his feet like someone who remembered not to die. The boy who'd been writing lines drank water and cried once, a plain sound th. It made Harry's ribs hurt more than the fight. Annabeth leaned on a pillar and let herself close her eyes for 2 heartbeats, nothing dramatic, just enough. We need to shut the spur, she said, voice rusty. Aris will pull it again if it worked once. We put a wedge in, Leo said. A boring wedge. City code. Sign off from 3 agencies. Make it dull. Dull as my woman, Rhea said. Introduce us. They made plans in the indifferent light. McGonagall was on a flow within 5 minutes. Chiron's face surfaced in a puddle near the curb, calm even when the street splashed him. Hunters set a watch. Aegis took custody of 2 bricked pylons with a silent nod from Cassian, joint receipts signed and photographed. It felt like a town council after a storm. Mud, tea, paperwork, and the relief that no one you love is missing. Harry drifted to the edge of the group because the air there felt less stiff with adrenaline. Cassian joined him, coat torn at the shoulder where the automaton's jaw had kissed him. Blood soaked dark under fabric, clean cut. You should let Will look at that, Harry said. I will, Cassian said, as if he had already planned to and was letting Harry think he'd convinced him as a favor. They stood. The river murmured under the bridge, bored and constant. London cleared its throat and kept being London. Your sister, Harry said, because he doesn't do well with ghosts that stand behind men's shoulders and never get spoken around. What did she say about balance? Cassian's jaw went iron for a second, then eased. He did not show Harry a wound. He offered him a sentence like a payment. She died in a flood, he said, simple as a ledger. Not because God sent it. Because people didn't bother to plan beyond tomorrow and then lied about it afterwards. She made me drink her last glass of water. Harry waited. There might be a point. It would not be the point Harry expected. She said. Make it cost to be careless, Cassian went on. Make it cost for everyone, including yourself. That's a clean rule, Harry said. It hurts, Cassian said. That's how I know it works. They stood in that harder quiet for another beat and then left it alone, men. Not obliged to rescue each other from the parts of their lives that will always ache. Will did look at the shoulder. He bound it with quick hands and no theater. You'll keep the scar, he said. Cassian nodded. Good, he said, and meant it. They split with a plan. Wedge the spur, draft an addendum to the Accord for Subterranean Incidents, specify who held the keys to any urban, boring wedges. And write the training packet so absurdly clear that even a bored intern couldn't ruin it. Hogwarts took them back like a mother smuggling noise into a quiet house to keep it from dying of silence. Kids were eating. The lake threw up a thin skin of ice under stars. No one cheered. They just let the rescuers sit. Harry chose the chair by the fire that didn't face a door. Daphne dropped into the neighboring seat and set tea in his hand without asking. He stared at his knuckles. They would be bruised by morning. The ache helped. It kept victory from becoming a drug. Your choice in the memory corridor, Daphne said after 2 sips. Clean. It was stupid for a second, he admitted. I wanted to make it easy. You made it clear, she said. I'll take clear. Piper leaned on the mantel. I'm off to threaten a journalist with good questions, she said. Anyone want me to be kind or cruel? Kind, Will said, deadpan. We can't afford lawsuits. Percy slouched into the seat across and nudged Harry's boot with his own. Thanks for whacking my head when the shard whistled, he said. I didn't whack your head, Harry said. Metaphorically, Percy said. Don't get pedantic. It makes me want to flood your bed. I'll sleep in a boat, Harry said. Gross, Daphne said. You two are unbearable. Leo popped in long enough to deposit a paper-wrapped parcel on the table. New dampener prototype, he said. Less, no gods allowed. More, no nonsense from rooms. Try not to break it when you test. He winked at Daphne. Make him sign a waiver. He already did, Daphne said. Annabeth arrived last, curls escaping. Eyes bright with the exact kind of satisfaction that comes from having made a map and returned with bodies instead of names. We need a plan for when a risk goes smaller, she said. Rumors, dormitories, dinner tables. We'll write one, Hermione said from the next table without looking up, quill already moving. Curriculum, not catechism. People need tools to unsnarl their own thinking. Anything else becomes a cudgel. Daphne saluted her with tea. Obsessed with verbs, she said. My favorite which. They stayed until the fire burned down and the ache eached their bones and the day got heavy enough to put down. On the way up the stairs, an owl found Harry and pecked his shoulder once, offended by gravity. The note tied to its leg had 3 words, tomorrow. Oversight, rotations. Cassian's handwriting, the kind that hated adornment. Harry smiled despite himself. Bureaucracy is victory. He could live with that. He slept and dreamed he was walking. G.A. hallway that tried to sell him his own memories at a markup. He paid in stubbornness and petty refusal and woke with the taste of dust and victory and tea in his mouth. He told the ceiling his rule again. He meant it more than yesterday. Morning came like a normal day pretending to be boring. It almost succeeded. Percy stole toast. Daphne stole Percy's toast back and gave it to Harry because she liked both boys and liked being right more. Annabeth set up a meeting with 3 stone-faced civil servants who didn't know they were about to be converted into allies by the power of clear diagrams. McGonagall swept in, robes a little crooked for once, which meant she negotiated with men who made her want to bite. She frowned like good news tastes sour on the way down. Our oversight board will have its first session this afternoon, she said. Try not to break it by proving it necessary too loudly. No flamboyance, Harry said solemnly. She sniffed. Keep the flamboyance for after you graduate. He grinned. She didn't. Not at first. Then she did, quick, like a coin flicked and caught. On the steps outside the Great Hall, the rescued healer waited and stunned him by hugging high. Like a little brother who didn't know how to calibrate gratitude yet. Thanks, the boy said, muffled. For not making me a story. Harry patted his shoulder, embarrassed. You're not one, he said. You're a person. The boy flushed and ran. Daphne knocked her knuckles lightly against Harry's arm. "That's why you get to keep doing this," she said. He looked out at Snow that couldn't decide whether to commit. The ring warmed in his sleeve, steady pulse to steady day. Somewhere under London, a wedge bored into the labyrinth's bad habits. Somewhere over London, Iris licked her teeth and redrafted her plans. Somewhere in a room with fluorescent lights, Cassian argued for a rotation schedule that would annoy everyone equally, and Rhea wrote a list titled "Off Limits Even in a Crisis" and underlined it 3 times. He wanted a nap. He wanted to kiss Daphne on a bridge where no one would misinterpret it. He wanted the next breach to try them without breaking them. He wanted 15 minutes where no one needed him. He got none of that yet. He got tea, and a meeting, and a day that would not glamorize him for doing what any grown person should. He could live with that. "Ready?" Daphne asked. "Yeah," he said. "Let's go keep the boring parts alive." They walked. The castle watched them without clapping. Good. The world doesn't need applause as much as it needs people who show up. When the floor tilts and the air smells like pennies and a boy is writing lines he never agreed to write. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Crownless and the Divine. The call came while Harry was arguing with a stubborn kettle. Percy didn't wait for "hello. Barrier," he said, voice thin from wind. "Iris is stringing harmonics through the Thames gates. Spring tide's early and mean. She's got furies. In the sluice tunnels and pylons on the catwalks." Harry's wand was already in his sleeve. "You have eyes on the thorn." "Yeah," Percy said. "She's using it like a tuning fork. Cassian's en route with a vault. I've got hunters on the north bank. Your end." "On my way," Harry said. He clicked the kettle off because Daphne would lecture him if he left it to melt, glanced once at the ring trembling inside his cuff, and cut through the common room at a run. Daphne intercepted him before the portrait swung shut. She had her coat half on, hair pinned like she didn't intend to let the wind bully her. "Don't flood a city for a metaphor," she said, which was her way of saying be smart, not big. "Wouldn't dare," he said, which was his way of saying he'd try. They gathered moving. Annabeth with a tube full of pylon schematics. Piper already tying her hair, Will packing vials with that brisk tenderness he took into rooms where pain lived, Leo jogging and muttering to a box that hissed back like a pet. McGonagall met them at the front steps, sleeves rolled by 2 inches, which meant she expected to throw hexes. "Don't wait on permission," she said. "Send receipts. We'll bring a signed copy," Annabeth promised, and jumped for the flow. The Thames barrier rose across the river like a row of silver teeth. Today the river wanted to bite. Brown water shouldered the gates. Wind knifed east. Furies clung to the superstructure like greasy birds, talons scraping steel, eyes bright with the kind of glee you only see in things that prefer chaos to any other meal. Iris stood on a maint. Nance gantry halfway out over the current. She had her hair in a simple braid. Her coat was practical. She looked like the senior engineer of a disaster. The thorn of Erebos hung in a brace over the central span, black and plain, vibrating with each insulted wave. "Welcome to the dress rehearsal," she called. Act 1. A city realizes it can live without its little agreements. Percy didn't answer. He peeled off toward the control house with 2 hunters and a man in a fluorescent jacket who had the air of a person who knew every bolt by name. Annabeth clambered onto the east catwalk, rope looped to her harness, lips moving as she counted bolts, seams, lines of sight. Piper planted herself at the base of the central stanchion and lifted her chin like she intended to shame the river into civility if need be. Harry took the middle and kept his hands visible. Iris watched him with amused curiosity. "You brought rules to a flood," she said. "How modern." Daphne, already setting frost long a ladder rhyme so the Furies couldn't land, said, "He brought a team that knows what they're for." Furies dove. Hunters drew and loosed in a rhythm that made fiction look slow. One Fury shrieked, clipped a line, spiraled into a net Percy flung across a truss, hit water, and hissed out like an insult caught between teeth. Leo slapped a dampener puck onto a pylon. It bit and went quiet. Another pylon still sang a high note only dogs and demigods hated. 3 pylons left, Annabeth snapped. They're slave to the thorn's pulse. If you hit the wrong one first, the frequency doubles. Which one first, then? Harry shouted, ducking as a Fury sailed by and flashed teeth at his ear. The one your bones dislike, she shot back. He didn't think. He listened. His ribs would bruise tomorrow. His fingers already ached. Under all of it, a low wrong buzz wantoned. He sprinted, leapt a gap that would have felt stupid if Percy hadn't thrown him a pressure step to land on, and slammed the rin. G flat against the pylon pretending to be a handrail. The metal sang a sour note. He hit it again, not to break. To interrupt. The hum stuttered. The thorn's vibration faltered. Orissa's smile tightened. Rhea. Cassian's voice cut through the wind. He emerged from the service stairs with Rhea and two Aegis carriers hauling a case that looked like a coffin shrunk in a wash. Blood stained his shoal. Der seam. London's gift from the labyrinth hadn't healed yet, but he moved like pain belonged in a queue behind his other priorities. Vaults primed, he said. We get the thorn into stasis or I drop tea in the estuary and let a sandbar eat it. That will not work, Oris said, cheerful. It remembers how to be big. Then we don't drop it, Harry said, breath ghosting in the cold. Oris tilted her head. You keep refusing ease. It won't make you lovable. He didn't dignify that with a reply. He dodged a sweep of claw, parried the next with the ring, and kept moving. Leo slid under a guard raw. Ilan started cutting a cable housing with a tool that whined at exactly the pitch to make monsters angry. Will stabbed a syringe into a hunter's thigh, counted to 4, and held a wrist until a pulse slowed. Piper's voice threaded across the catwalks. Not sweet, not impolitic. Honest. You can choose to stand. That's all I'm asking. Percy. Annabeth called. Gate 2 will jam if the pylons spike again. I need a 40-second lull or the hinges fuse. 40 is rude, Percy yelled back, but I'm delightful. He planted his feet, put both palms up, and herded the river like a flock. The water slamming against the gates shifted. Pressure easing just enough to steal the next shove's teeth. Oris used the lull to adjust the arrangements. She tapped the thorn's brace with 2 fingers. The harmonics flared. Voices rose on the banks. Whispers in clusters. They'll fail. They'll kill us to save a rule. This is what happens when you trust children. This is what happens when you trust mortals. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Doubt is efficient. Harry, Daphne said, voice level. She was 5 meters away, boots braced, wand steady. She could always tell when the pull at his sternum turned from urge to use into urge to cheat. Don't. I know, he said, and meant it. He could paint over the crowd with agreement. He could drown the prickle of panic with molasses comfort. He could. He did not. He thought of the greenhouse where they'd smothered flowers that lied about safety. He thought of the amphitheater lane he'd carved instead of their minds. He thought of a boy writing lines he never chose. He let the pull pass and left it hungry. Lane finding only, he said to Piper and Will. Keep civilians from panicking. Don't hand them a feeling. Copy. Will called. I've got a low hum that says breathe and a glare that says don't be stupid. Perfect, Daphne said, and pinned a fury through the wing. Oris rolled her shoulders like a dancer preparing a turn. Mortals do love their little vows, she said. Let's see if they float. She twisted her hand. The harmonics converged. The thorn answered like a tuning fork in a cathedral. The gates groaned. The barrier's great teeth started to rise out of sync. That was the play. Flood, panic, blame, break the accord before it took its first step. Annabeth saw it the same second Harry did. We go to the pylons together, she said. 3 points. Pylon. Thorn brace. Central relay. We hit them in that order, on my call. An orchestra, Cassian said. How quaint. Funny, Annabeth said. Your second chair. They ran the spans like rats on ship ropes. A fury dived for Annabeth. Rhea took its leg off and vaulted the body. Leo slid on his back under a brace and slapped a puck home. Percy threw a wave high. It flattened a half-dozen winged shapes and bought 3 seconds. Will dragged a fisherman off a lower walkway with a healer's tackle and swore about ladders. Piper stepped into a cluster of spectators on the south bank as they teetered toward a bad rumor and said, look at your own hands, and 20 people did, and the rumor lost altitude because humans remembered they were. Harry reached the furs, T-pylon and drove the ring into the seam with a shiver that stung his wrist. 1, Annabeth called. 2, Leo yelled from under the relay housing, tool bird to maximum. 3, Percy barked at the thorn brace. Then gave Annabeth a hard second because the river whispered please and he said no to it and to himself and to any glory in letting water be God. Now, Annabeth shouted. They hit. The harmonic web stuttered like a heart being reset. The thorn's vibration faltered. Aris caught the change in midair and spun it, almost saving her lattice on reflex. Almost. Again. Annabeth called. Harry felt the urge to force the moment open, to smash a certainty through so clean it would silence all dissent. He saw Daphne, white breath, steady eyes, and chose restraint. No spear made of love, he muttered. And hit the seam precisely, nothing extra. The web collapsed, not theatrical, just a system that no longer fit together. The thorn shivered. Vault. Cassian barked. The Aegis CARRIERS shoved the case forward as if it weighed nothing. Rhea kicked the latch. Cassian pulled the stasis cradle free, a square mouth with glittering runes etched down to their minimal grammar. It hummed the way a professional hums. No ornament, just function. Aris frowned in real annoyance for the first time all day. You're going to put it in a box. That sounded, to her, like telling a story and forbidding adjectives. In a box with 3 locks, Daphne said crisply, 2 of which you can't charm. Percy planted 1 foot on the brace of the thorn and 1 on the catwalk, muscles bunched in his shoulders as he held the river from deciding now. We have 2 seconds, he said through his teeth. Harry read him without reaching and set his timing to Percy's breath. He met Cassian's eyes and didn't hate the man for once. On 3, he said. 1, 2. Annabeth had already moved. She snapped the last relay and cracked a knot. The thorn fell like a mean thought. Harry stepped into the space, ring hand up, wand hand steady. He didn't command, he caught. The aura he let out wasn't warmth, it was consent. We're doing this because we choose to together. Percy slammed a wall of river ag. Ain't the base to buy the half-breath they needed. Cassian shoved the vault forward. Daphne carved ice along the inside lip so the shard slid clean. The thorn hit stasis with a dull, expensive sound. Everything else let go. The Furies screamed and scattered, hungry things that hated boredom. The harmonics went out with a sigh. The gates finished their cycle like machines that had been interrupted by a rude song and were relieved to return to meter. The crowd's noise turned into the normal mess of humans, laughing, crying, yelling, cheering, swearing about cold feet and missed appointments. Aris stood very still and watched the vault hum with all the dignity of a god who has just lost a very old game to people who remembered to bring tea and torque wrenches. That was almost art, she said to Harry. You made them do it themselves. They did it themselves, he said. I just didn't get in the way. She smiled, wide and hungry again. You will be unbearable to corrupt. Find a different hobby, Daphne said. Darling, Aris told her, I have so many. She touched the rail once, like tasting metal, and then her shape folded out of the air as if the city had blinked and decided not to host her anymore. Silence fell in that scruffy, glorious way it does after chaos breaks its ankle. People clapped in pockets and then got embarrassed and stopped because there was no stage. Percy sagged against the railing and let the river resume being the river. The water took the hint and pretended it had only ever been that. Will leaned his forehead against a steel strut and exhaled, like a man who had held too many heartbeats upright for an hour. Piper hugged a stranger and made a joke about hot cocoa that ended with 3 old women promising to bring a vat. Leo kissed his puck. Annabeth lowered herself onto a beam and looked like she might cry from relief but refused to give the day the theater. Cassian clicked the locks on the vault one after another, each with a tone T said this was designed by someone who likes sleeping at night. He slid a steel strap across and sealed it. The case hummed, then settled. Joint custody, he said to Harry without flourish. Rotation. Oversight minutes published the next day. Anyone breaks the chain, we break their career. Add a clause about independent audits, Daphne said. I know 3 women with red pens who scare me. Excellent, Rhea murmured. Hire them. Quote, McGonagall arrived by broom she pretended not to own, hair ruined, eyes bright. She took in the gates, the case, the absence of screaming, the presence of shivering. I brought blankets, she announced, because of course she had. And a press statement which can be read by any adult who can hold a paragraph without stroking their own ego. Piper grinned. I'll read it and add a joke. You will do no such thing, McGonagall said, which meant she would indulge exactly one. By late afternoon, the barrier had settled into its usual mechanical dignity. Crews took stock with calm voices. Hunters collected arrows. Aegis wrote receipts in carbon paper that would be scanned and filed and argued over by people who thought signatures were religion. The VA. Ult rode in the back of a black van that looked like it contained sandwiches, guarded by 3 people who could break a building and had chosen not to. The Accord, which had barely dried, got its first addendum on the riverbank. Written under a canopy while tea steamed and fingers thawed. Artifact stasis and rotation protocol, medical exemption reaffirmed, student protections extended to ad hoc aid stations. Cassian signed first, handwriting austere. McGonagall signed next, practical. Chiron's signature shimmered by proxy on a page that smelled faintly of rainbows. Hunter's signed as a block. Ha! RRY added his name where his own leash lived, resonant lane making, scope and limits. Daphne added a clause about public education and informed consent that would make 3 committees grown and 3 kids safer next year. Penhaligon appeared with a checkbook and the dazed look of a man who has just watched people save his investments, basements. He had the grace to ask, "Where do I send the money that keeps this dull and enforceable?" "Into a fund with 3 signatures, Daphne said without missing a beat. 2 mortal, 1 mortal, none named Penhaligon. He laughed, real, and wrote a number big enough to haunt him pleasantly. As twilight drifted in and the first reporters realized nothing explosive would happen on camera, the crews packed. Percy stood on the catwalk and let the wind LLY his hair while he watched the river play nice. He looked tired with the good exhaustion that comes from lifting the heavy thing and setting it down without dropping it on anyone's foot. "Call me when the river starts talking weird again," he told Harry, shoulder bumping his, too casual to be goodbye. "I will," Harry said. "Don't flood Parliament without me." "Tempting," Percy said. "Don't," Annabeth and Daphne said in perfect stereo. He grinned and jogged to the control house to collect a damp jacket he'd borrowed. Hunters melted into shadow with the economy of professionals. Aegis peeled away in clean rows. The vault van turned onto the road and disappeared into the city's appetite for traffic. Harry and Daphne took the long walk to the bridge because their legs asked for movement that didn't involve nearly dying. London wore tonight like a coat pulled up against worry. The barriers glinted. The city hummed with its rude normalness. No banners. No parades. "Good. You didn't cheat," Daphne said at last. "I wanted to," he admitted. "I know," she said. "That's why it counts." He looked at her and didn't inflict feeling on her. He let it sit between them like a warm thin. Gee, they'd built with calluses and choices. "Do you want to walk?" she said. "That's what I want." They walked. They passed a couple arguing about dinner plans who stopped to share a scarf. They SSED a busker playing something off-key and earnest. They passed a poster decrying divine interference and another inviting people to a free seminar on mythic incident readiness. Both felt almost true. He could live with almost true if the people behind it learned to count and to listen. Halfway across the bridge, Daphne stopped and leaned on the railing. The river threw the city back in glimpses. Her hand found his, unforced. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to. "You keep saying you make room for choice," she said. "Today you made room for courage. That's different." He turned that over. "Maybe that's the same thing," he said. "Maybe choice is just courage with paperwork." She snorted. "You're insufferable," she said, but she squeezed his fingers. He told himself one last promise for the day, not grand. Not carved into stone. Small. Useful. No lies dressed as safety. No love used as leverage. He said it beside the older vows and felt them line up, neat as stitches. Behind them, McGonagall's press statement went out. Dry, precise, stubbornly human. It creaked across the owl lines and the wireless in equal measure. No heroes, only teams. No saviors, only systems. Thous. And people read it and felt something unclench behind their teeth without knowing why. The Oversight Board scheduled their first audit. Cassian drafted the rota with an annoying fairness that made his own operatives groan. Rhea posted a list in the Aegis break room titled "Don't Start Wars by Accident" and drew 4 boxes to be ticked before anyone fussed with anything older than Rome. Eris, wherever gods go when cities stop clapping. licked a small cut on her knuckle and smiled like a person who had found a new board to play on. She would not vanish. She would, Harry suspected, get smarter and pettier and harder to spot. Good. They would get better too. Back at Hogwarts, the Great Hall forgave the cold and warmed them for the crime of surviving. Ron stole dessert. Hermione argued with AJ. Unior Undersecretary threw 2 letters at once and then handed Harry a pamphlet draft about emotional autonomy in magical emergencies, and asked him to redline it for charm safety. He said yes. He would always say yes to boring documents that saved lives. Later, under the high windows, the castle creaked and settled. Students laughed too loud. Someone cried in a corner and was listened to. A fire popped like punctuation. Normal isn't small. Normal is earned. On their way out, Percy, already halfway to the flow, tossed a wave over his shoulder. "Hey, Aphrodite's kid," he called, grinned back. "Nice orchestra." Harry bowed an inch. "Nice damn," he said. Percy laughed and vanished in a swirl. Daphne squeezed Harry's hand once more and let go, not with reluctance but with the ordinary grack. Of people who plan to choose each other again tomorrow. "Sleep," she ordered. "You're going to try to edit Hermione's pamphlet at 2 in the morning and commit a crime against commas." "I would never," he said. "You absolutely would," she countered, and left him with that comfortable insult, which felt better than any anthem. Harry climbed the stairs, ring cool in his sleeve, heartbeat steady. He didn't feel bigger. He didn't feel smaller. He felt used up in the exact right way and ready to be filled by tea, sleep, and a morning where the loudest decision he'd make was whether to sit by the window. At the dorm door, an owl waited with an envelope stamped with 3 seals: Ministry, Camp, Aegis. He laughed and opened it. Accord ratified. Provisional, the heading read. Oversight Board constituted, it said. First audit scheduled, it promised. Boring triumph. He tucked it under his pillow like a joke to show Ron in the morning when the boy would insist audits were euphemisms for naps. He slid into bed and let the day shelve itself. The ring warmed once and then went perfectly still, as if content to be only metal until the next time hands needed it. He breathed and let the last of the river sound bleed out of his bones. No prophecies, no pomp, just a boy who could speak and refused to steal anyone's choice, asleep in a school that had made room for that. Chapter 8 N.